Hello.
Good evening,
So
everyone.
welcome to the evening. Richard, how are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a long day as usual. Lots of stuff got done as usual. And finally, we're here with the third session of the day. Live from London, me and David.
Yeah.
As has become customary at this latest slot of the day.
You know what? I enjoyed this with you. I actually find it's great. We can be the two Muppets. I keep forgetting their names. What are their names?
I think Waldorf is
Waldorf,
one.
and who's the other one? So if you're Waldorf, then who's the other one? I'm going to try and look it up. I'm going to have to try and look it up.
Let's just stick with the other one for the time being.
Waldorf and the other one. Well,
Yeah.
Tonight what we have is we're going to have an amazing personal responsibility coach, and we've heard a lot about individuals as they face climate challenges and how they navigate through it. And a central part of that we've had to the whole stories is how we manage to take charge of that ourselves. And so we're going to have a conversation with Andrea Mason, personal responsibility coach, who's also a brilliant author, a best-selling author of Victim to Victorious, her own autobiographical story of how you come from being a victim to victorious. Essential elements, I'm sure, that we all face as we look to our climate challenges. And then we're going to have an interview with an amazing musician, Brudini.
No.
Brudini. What am I talking
about? Musician. But tonight we're not speaking to the musician. Tonight we are speaking with the former hedge fund manager and the private investor that he is nowadays, Erik Brudvik.
So it is Brudvik.
Yeah, Brudvik.
There you go.
It was recorded about a week ago, but we feel pretty confident that nothing much has happened to alter the story from there on. We haven't had any seismic events that actually has changed that outlook materially. We will show it in two clips, and we will debate a little bit in between what was actually being discussed, because I think he makes some excellent points. It is not simply, but this can also be seen as a little bit of a continuation of the debate David and I had the other night when we had asked the poll, why do we find current investment climate so tough? And he makes some very good points. But that's for later tonight. As usual, we are going with a very familiar theme. We want to send you out on a good note, a happy note, by laughing sustainably together, of course. So it's time for the fifth episode of Who's Tipping Over the Tipping Point.
The show that keeps you laughing sustainably. Here we go.
The only quiz show that
come to Who Tipped You Over the Tipping Point. The show that keeps you laughing unstuntable. Don't worry, English is not my first language. So I'm here with a very good, wonderful people here. So today we're going to play a game. Everyone's going to show products that we think should not be in this planet. And we can discuss as we go and make some jokes as well. I'm going to hand over to David because he's one of the directors of this show, and Richard, and me and Kate were just best guests on the show.
And in case anyone is wondering, the scoring is already started. And it's been handicapped according to the ability and the humor people are able to contribute, as you can tell. And Richard there has been handicapped because he's late. And Ian and I, we're there ready in our neutral starting point. So today we had a number of suggestions, a number of ideas that have come through, and I'm going to start screen sharing with. There you go.
Drum roll. Ooh.
What is that, and would you have it?
Looks pretty good. Certainly better than what I cook normally.
Is it lab grown meat or something like that?
Oh, you're very good, aren't you? She really is very good. Yes.
Yeah, I bow to the Supremo. So that is actually a dish from laboratory grown meat. Wow.
Yes,
it looks good, actually.
It's actually been cooked. I've seen this stuff before. It's actually been cooked, but Singapore has allowed it and is actually on sale in restaurants. So if you want to go and solve climate crisis, as I've been told, the thing that will get you there is lab-grown meat. Single-handedly, it will cure everything. It's the panacea.
Wow.
Yes.
The magic bullet. Yes.
And hopefully not just because it kills off humans. That would be
that's a radical way of resolving the climate crisis, but I suspect it actually would work.
not the favorite one.
God, she is radical, you know.
I don't know how they actually grow it, but you imagine a little petri dish like the one you had in GCSE science, don't you?
Yes.
With a little wing or chicken breast sort of just growing on it, but I don't know how they actually do it and whether it is sustainable. But meat is such a big one, isn't it? That we're going to try.
I think they grow it much like quavers make crisps.
Oh, that's not inspiring, I have to say. So what else is in there? I mean, it looks like there is some form of carbohydrates in the form of pasta or noodles.
I think they've got lab-grown pasta as well and lab-grown peppers.
Okay, so it's basically fully scientific. Okay.
It's fully scientific, fully lab-grown.
But no doubt very healthy for you.
No doubt, no doubt.
No doubt
Actually, no one knows yet because nobody's eaten enough of it to know whether they survive. And if Katie is right, we're not going to find out.
I think the thing is, like, I feel much more worried about the taking of like vegetables and salads and everything like that into these vertical farms, because as much as we've denuded the soil and everything, you still feel like there's a lot of microbes and everything like that on the vegetables and stuff that we don't know about how the microbes help us in our stomachs or our immune systems and everything like that. Now we know all about the gut being like our second brain. But meat, I mean, we pump so many antibiotics into the stuff that grows into the animals that grow our meat. I'm not sure that it's anything like, sort of what nature intended, what we eat at the moment, even though it does come from animals. So I feel quite positive about the lab-grown meat, I must say. Maybe that's just because I'm not sure I'm going to eat it, but I'm pleased that everyone else is going to eat it.
You're happy with the option. You're happy with the option.
It's because you're vegan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm not vegan.
You like it because you don't actually. Yeah. Do you remember that scene in Notting Hill? Is it Notting Hill? Yeah, I think it was Notting Hill. It was a Hugh Grant film with that movie star. Can't remember her name. Anyway. So there's that scene in there where Hugh Grant is on these sort of speed date type things, or on these blind dates. That's it, blind dates. And she meets this woman who tells her she's a fruitarian, which says that basically anything that's not she only eats fruits, but only fruits that have fallen on the ground, because otherwise it's murder.
Okay.
And they're at this restaurant together when she's having this conversation. So I'm not sure what was on their plate. I can't remember, but I'm sure it wasn't fruit.
I can tell it's a pretty long winter in the UK, That's and spring is not going to be very helpful either. So, I don't see that. But I can actually see this taking off massively for all the reasons Katie outlined. But also, I think there is a practical economic story here as well. Meat is getting much more expensive in relative terms in your food basket. And I think, looking at the younger generation, I think it's not only an environmental, emotional, or, conscious decision to not eat meat. I think it's also an economic decision. You go in and look at what meat costs in shops. If you're going to have a nice piece and cook, that's a lot of money for a lot of people. And this might be a path forward to actually enable better protein intake at a much lower cost. So, for me, it's a big thumbs up, I think, despite all the reservations. The microbes we'll find out about later, But
oh no, it's a horrible idea. I think you should just eat less meat if that's what you don't. If it's just
absolutely, that's definitely an option, But at the end of the day, if you are vegetarian, you have quite a limited amount of options if you want a protein intake. There's not a huge amount of variety. There's only so much tofu you can stuff yourself with, really. And I see this taking off. I'm sorry, actually, I'm like 80% positive on this. And then we find out we didn't survive. Tough luck.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think this is such a horrible idea. Sorry, but
Oh. Okay.
There's so many. I mean, people eat so much meat in the Western diet, and yet it's actually bad for us. It's one of the things that makes me think we're not going to solve climate change because we keep eating bacon and sausages, and we know that that's bad for ourselves, and we can't stop that. So, but there's so much meat being eaten. There is such a growing number of people in the world that are getting to the stage where they want to eat meat the same amount as the Western diet eats meat every day. And so we've got to find a way. I think it's one of those that, as much as people moving to a more vegan or vegetarian diet is happening, it's not, we have got to find a way to enable people to eat meat, because the shift needs to happen really, really soon. There's not much more Amazon we can chop down to make soy to feed beef. And so a very tasty, possibly cheaper alternative very, very soon is, I think, the only way to make this transition. And then we can focus on, no.
No, David, you're a minority.
I may be a minority, but I'll say it won't stop the 50 billion chickens that we kill every year. It won't stop that from growing to 60, 70 either. And all you do is it's the same thing as the times when we build more roads in order to solve traffic congestions. You just end up eating more meat. So what you have is you end up eating the artificial stuff and the real stuff, and you just get more of it. This is the part where our economics and things don't work that way. It doesn't stop us.
Because I think there's a lot of people and lots of people, that there's terrible welfare standards in there for the animals. I mean, particularly in the UK, where we're very, very animal welfare friendly. I think if there was a decent alternative, a lot of people would like to move away from animal-based meat. But at the moment, we just bury our head in the sand. I had a conversation with my son the other day about little piggies and pork and bacon and sausages, and he just doesn't want to know. He doesn't want me to tell him that a pork and a bacon comes from a pig. And so I think a lot of people feel like that, head in the sand.
I had a conversation. I was living in Japan many years ago, and there was this conversation about how young people no longer know what real animals and things are like. And I was working in a laboratory, a physics laboratory, not a Frankenstein laboratory, but it might as well have been that. And the guy was saying there was this TV program on. My Japanese wasn't good enough to watch this, but it's one of these reality TV Japanese programs. They were way ahead of Europe with these sort of things. And they asked these school kids, what do fish look like? And they asked them in the supermarket or wherever it was. And about half of them literally thought they were sliced lumps of meat is how they were in nature. They didn't actually associate it with the things that swims in rivers and stuff. So I think what you're talking about is very similar in that way.
No, I think that you actually, it's very important kids find out, and if we really want to turn large parts of the population vegan/vegetarian, I think every school should make a compulsory visit to a pig factory, effectively, or a chicken factory, because whoever comes out of there and still eats the stuff, I really fear for them.
Or they come out saying, "Oh, I love this as a job." I love this idea.
Yeah,
But,
those are the people you really need to work.
Vegan or vegetarian. You just have to have this sense. When I grew up, we ate much less meat. Simply that. Most diets have much less meat in them, and it's only this marketing of meat. Actually, Sainsbury's, I've noticed, has a smaller meat department now than it used to a year ago. Or my local Sainsbury's.
There are a lot more meat substitutes, but a lot of the current meat substitutes are very heavily soy, wheat based. And so I think people are being encouraged away from meat, but actually the soy proteins and the wheat, they're not that great for you. People think of a vegan diet as better for you. And that's why, I can argue for the substitutes, but fundamentally, every time humanity comes up with a good idea, we manage to make it a really bad idea. And so just seeing this as like a panacea without really understanding, is there any difference in how we might digest it, how we might, how it might provide us with nutrients and that sort of thing? Because a lot of the things that are substitutes aren't real substitutes in terms of the nutrients. I know, because my whole family, we each drink a different milk, and when you investigate each one of them, there's different terrible issues with all of them in terms of nutrients or sustainability or
So
okay,
Nico, what would they say? Yeah.
Okay, I just want to see that photo again, just for 1 minute, man. It's so exciting.
It is, isn't it? It is, isn't it? And
it is. It is.
What I think is we have this ability to make things go bad, no matter what we think, like Katie's talking about.
And there is,
okay.
If we think, actually, we don't need the source of protein, which is fish, that a lot of people rely on now. It's okay, then we can carry on plundering the oceans. It's one of the things I worry about with the vertical farming. It's like, we don't need healthy soils anymore. We don't need nature anymore. We can do everything in a, little sealed container like the big city they're building in Saudi. I think that disconnection between us and nature, whilst on the one hand, it might be a practical thing because we are getting rid of nature at a very, very fast rate. And so we need to do something about that. But if we completely disconnect ourselves and think that we're able to survive without nature, we'll sort of have a rude awakening quite soon.
I actually agree with that. I'm sorry to say, I hate to admit it. I'm desperately trying to find a reason not to agree with you there, but I can't.
It's exactly what we're doing. We're using technology to subvert nature, and that's really not a good idea in the long run.
Yeah. Go on, Nico. What have you noticed then?
Okay, for me, this is for laugh, because I'm not an expert on what you guys are talking about. If we ask an African person, is that a myth? I'll be like, no. That doesn't look at me. I'm from the planet where we're always known for starving. Even if I was starving, according to the picture, I'll be like, no, I'm not hungry today. Because we eat about taste, when you talk about meat. Yes. We think about taste, we think about as well nutrient, of course, cool. But my question is, I'm not arguing about all this, the way we are trying to change the world. It's just like, how much is it cost, for example, for the poor world? And secondly, if we keep animals as everybody wants to keep the animals, nothing dies. We have 8 billion people already on the planet, and then maybe 8 billion animals, everything crashing together this planet without any control. It might cause problem maybe, but I don't like eating too much meat as well. Since I came to Europe, which means it's good, a change. But when I was small, my mother shoved a meat in my mouth, so you can't preach me like when you call don't eat meat. It's like my religion when I was small, And now, of course, we're all dying for change. We need a process. We need a process that is understandable by the poor countries, for example. Like a COP26, one American lady, she said to me, by 2030, I would like to see all Africans, she said, all people be vegetarians. I'm like, you can't do that, because you can't tell me that
so is that the image then? Is that the meat?
This one, no, that's the meat. That one doesn't scare me actually. This look fresh, you know.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm worried about. The only thing I'm worried about is like the vampires now say, "Don't eat meat," but that's a vampire to me. But anyway, as a host, I don't have to make comments like much. My job is to make people laugh, suitable. And I agree with you guys. So the points are coming up very soon. I think this is very tight. But anyway, I'm not favorite. I don't know. People maybe they're gonna start thinking maybe I'm biased on this. But
Katie. Yep, Katie is yes, great, but who knows what the hell is going to happen after? Richard is we need this, and I am just eat fewer chickens if you want to. if you want to go down that route first, and when you've run out and you find that actually you can't manage.
I'm gonna give Kat 30 because she really actually she went through excited about explaining stuff and blah blah, and which in the audience are happy to hear that as well. And a bit of giggling is cost about 10 points. That's good.
That's harsh.
You're muted, Katie.
We don't want to see sad people, sad faces like Richard, but he's a good guy. You know, so
sorry, does that give an extra 10 points or 10 points less?
No, we'll give Richard 25.
25.
I'm happy with that.
And then we'll give the host 35. Sorry, the guy who produced a very wonderful dish, which means I don't know if it can be acceptable in Africa. We need some more explanation on that. But and well Ian, done, guys. That's the first round.
And Ian, for not showing up, what does he get for being the most sustainable?
Minus 40 from yesterday.
Sorry, minus 40 from yesterday. Oh, that's so mean.
No, I don't know. Because he's not here today, so we're not working from yesterday, we're working from today. So we can actually give him points because he's a member of the show. Yes. So we can give him 15.
Wow. That takes.
Because if we give too many points, the people will not do much work. So we need like to get more points. You need to get some more energy on this as well.
Yes. So Katie's going to have to hurry. Katie's going to have to catch up.
Tough. Very tough.
So for our next...
How come Katie scored 10? Oh, yeah, she had the deductions. Sorry.
Yes. She had deductions, that's right. So
it's tough being good, you know. It's a handicap for us, you know, older. I feel confident by that. There you have it. The only quiz show that makes you keep on laughing sustainably. And this evening we debated the merits of organic or non-organically grown meat, however you want to put it, and what the future looks like.
That's $100 a kilogram, between $50 and $100 a kilogram, lab-grown meat. So premium price, you know.
Yeah.
£10 for a burger.
Yeah, but remember what cars were costing when they came out, right? Prices are going to drop as we move forward. I'm not so worried. I am genuinely positive on this stuff. You know, I actually think it will make a difference. But there we are.
I'm sure it'll make a difference to your wallet.
Yeah. You're just anti-progress. What can I say?
Anti-progress, preserving my wallet.
We are going to be growing all sorts of stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Can you imagine that you grow them with legs and they can move around? And then eventually, you know,
will happen one day, but
other animals give birth to them. And then you suddenly find
to see that.
Yeah,
no. I think actually I think we will go down a much different route. I think we'll be growing lots of this stuff really, really cheaply. It won't taste that great, but it will probably give people the nutrition they need to survive. And I see that as a much more likely outcome than all the fancy things. I think these gigantic tents growing.
You do know we have twice as many people with health problems from overeating than the number of people with health problems from malnutrition.
But there are other aspects that worry me about food production, as we will find out another evening when we play the last episode of me interviewing Christoph Hayes and what his outlook is for farming around the world. That is a very sobering episode, so I'm bigging it up here, but it might be quite scary for some people.
Yes, but first, I'd like to take us back to tonight and the personal responsibility.
Indeed,
it's ultimately up to us what we choose to eat and what we choose to put into our body. And we have a guest with us tonight, Andrea Mason. Welcome, Andrea.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Very well, very well. Thank you for coming. We did an interview with you a little while back, and that was in case that you couldn't make it and there were dates, there might be issues and stuff. But we're so pleased that you're here, and we have Richard here as well, whom you didn't meet the last time.
Hello, Richard. Thank you so much.
Hello, Andrea. And we do feel a lot better now that you are here, actually.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Guys, I was listening. You guys have been laughing a lot, so that's a good sign. Always to come on a panel where everybody's laughing, where their faces are just flushed. So that's a good sign. I'm glad to be here. Good thing it's not the opposite.
It is. It is. We are meant to be taking. I wouldn't say the lighter side. I would say the more personal side to the whole COP28 event. Right. And we as we mentioned previously, this started when Richard and I, actually the year we left the investment industry, where we were investment managers for 30 years. And that was the year of COP26, wasn't it? 2020.
No, it was 25.
COP25.
Time travels fast when you're having
fun.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So 26 was the one
just
where...
ignore 21, 22, 20, and
exactly.
20. Yeah, those 3 years don't mean anything.
Right. It's like when you tell your age, to people, just skip a few years here and there. It works really well. Not a problem.
Right. My second or third time around being 21. That's where I'm at.
Yes. That's the way to do it. And anyway, we felt out of it that the mood from the media and everything was so negative. It was kind of like dismissing and invalidating all the things that people were actually doing.
Right.
So we started with this, had this idea along It's For You, together with kind of people we were working with that earlier, and that we still are, I guess.
Right.
But anyway, and it's been a remarkable experience so far. It's been one of really, really connecting. And what we did, I hope it's okay. We took some of the clips from the interview we had, and we thought that we may start from there and come along through. I hope it's not like suddenly throwing it at you. This is not an ambush.
You can take it out on me, Andrea.
It's all right. I'll brace myself. I'm ready for the challenge.
And so these have all been vetted by Richard. So
all right. So he's the blame. Okay.
He's the one to blame.
No problem. All right.
So we start with one where you talked about forgiveness and fear.
Yes.
And it's really good because I think as a starting point of where we are, as we go on to face our climate challenges, whatever your view of climate might be, you're going to feel probably somewhat under threat simply by whichever side you happen to be facing as you go along. And so that's kind of this aspect of being able to take that responsibility and that ownership in a way. And you said something along there that we want to bring back up, and maybe we can pick that up as a conversation point. That's okay. I'm just going to play that.
Okay. And when we are able to face our past will no longer be able to chase us, and we can connect with individuals who may remind us of somebody, but we have the healing power of forgiveness to achieve personal freedom, to allow you to branch out and learn more, to make an informed decision rather than an influential decision. What often occurs is the fear factor.
That Richard really kind of thought, you know what, that fear factor, she's so right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it plays a significant role in all aspects, especially when we are making decisions. As you had talked about earlier on in this segment with the other panelists, was, really we have a bunch of options available, but when it comes down to it, as David had mentioned, it comes down to choice. The freedom of free will and choice, whether or not you have the ability to follow the herd or follow your heart, and not the herd nor the herd. And that fear factor plays into us so profoundly, in that we don't know what we need to do, which is right or wrong, because today's society, the morning news, MOURNING, is just toxic with negative suggestions, recommendations. And what's happening in today's society is we are getting so swayed and in constant chaos, because one day, 1 month, 1 week, 1 hour, we're told to follow this pattern, this habitual ritual, to make sure that you're on the right path. And then less than a week, a couple of months, even a year, you find out, hey, you were doing it wrong. And so what we have to do as individuals, because there's more of us than them, is make the informed decision, doing your research, making sure that you're in alignment with your mind, body, spirit, and soul. But that fear factor comes in to, well, what if I'm the only one? What if I get made fun of? What are people going to think? And when we change our channel in that regard, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, when we turn that switch off and say it's not about the other people's opinions, it's about what I'm doing in my life, that's when we make the choice of being proactive as opposed to inactive in our personal lives.
And that's so right. That aspect is just like the who tipped over the tipping point, the segment before, with that choice that we have, right? Kind of, and this part where you follow through, and it seems everybody's telling you this is the direction. You go left, and everybody's saying left is the right thing to do, and you start saying, okay, I'm listening to you. I want to be a good citizen. I want to be helping everybody along with getting the world to where it needs to be. And then you read the paper, and the next thing is all about how this is all greenwashing and really ought to be right or nowhere, and you get quite lost. I think a lot of people today is finding more anxiety from this thing about greenwashing.
Yes.
Because they just don't know what to do.
And that's why it's called programming, a TV program, a radio program, news. It's reading an article. Because what, I had also mentioned in this segment was, being unplugged. What does it mean to be unplugged? It's not shunning or denying the world around you, but it's selectively making an active choice of what you want to invest in your mind, your body, spirit, soul, financially, and in your surroundings, in your environment. Because what happens is, if, think about it. How many years has it been now that we've had technology? Okay. And before technology, right? When we didn't have even, I could say TV, but a little bit more extreme was having technology at our fingertips. I would say, and even the computer, you go down that rabbit hole. But when we didn't have constant media in our faces all the time, we had the ability to do recon. We had the ability to do research. We had the ability to experience life firsthand. Now, at the click of a button at 3 years old, those are the babysitters of our children, unfortunately, right now. A screen. How do we keep the child, quiet? Or how do we distract them for a moment? Not to be rude, but it's factual. It's facts. And so when we don't have the ability to take accountability and responsibility and control in what we are putting into our minds, it's the law of attraction. Thoughts become things. Energy flows where focus goes, they say. So if you're focusing on, oh my goodness, there's, chaos outside, I'm doing something wrong, I have to have this many followers, I have to have this many, videos or something, and you're comparing yourself to the external world, you're missing out on the beautiful journey of personal and professional development.
Yeah, we had. Sorry, Richard. You.
No, I think what you're describing is two aspects that immediately comes to mind for me as someone, maybe because he was just a naughty child, has never really gone with the flow of things. I've been perfectly happy most of my life to take contrarian views, and I don't mind throwing a few hand grenades in at the dinner party, by being really opposite the common prevailing wisdom. But ultimately, you need to own up and take responsibility for your actions.
Yes.
And that comes down to the choice you're describing. Oh, it was the computer who made me do it. Yeah, but come on here. You opted to switch it on and watch very violent video games. And then, you go out, you shoot someone and your defense attorney says, oh, he was conditioned by the computer. It's like, in my world, that doesn't wash. It's a complete no-go route.
Right. Absolutely. It's a choice. You had the right to turn on the TV. What we have to understand, and I think we need to highlight, and for our younger generations and the audience to kind of have that epiphany that these are just tools. It's how we use those tools for the greater good or not. And it's a choice. Again, going back to what Richard is saying, it's you are the one with your hand on the controller, and it's a matter of, are you taking accountability and responsibility for the elephant in the room of not letting go of your past, the trauma, the drama, the emotions, all of the suppressed emotions that you are either pushing down because you have to grind and go forward to live paycheck to paycheck, to contribute to the household financially, emotionally, and physically, or to sustain as a human being in society. But if we aren't addressing and looking in the mirror of who am I not, and really taking moment to ask that question and answer it honestly, then who else are we going? You can't win with the blame game at anybody.
No, it doesn't work. And I firmly believe in the right, but also the responsibility that comes with making your own choices in life.
Absolutely.
And we have become very much picking sort of the cherries off the cake and say, yeah, I want all the freedom and all the right to do whatever I want, but then I'm not prepared to take the other side of that coin, and it just doesn't wash with me. For me, it's basically it's an intellectually flawed argument, for a better word. It just doesn't sit right with me at all.
Absolutely.
But on the other side, I have to say, I'm quite scared of doing that. I mean, in my own way, just sort of being honest here, kind of thing. It's easier to say, it was Richard. And
honestly, God, it wasn't me, it was him.
No, but I mean, I'm actually being serious in that way, and I find myself swayed very easily. When the room changes, I find that actually I'm now becoming sort of, I took a step forward and I'm now stepping back, and the room is now swaying that way, and I think, oh well, okay, fine, and holding that is really difficult.
And what do you think that fear is stemming from? Not to go into a therapy session with Dr. David, but we do have to get to the root cause rather than find a solution. What is that fear? Because you hear this all the time with motivational speakers or life coaches, but there is some truth to reality. No excuses, just results. Is on the other side of fear is success. I mean, think about it. Look at all of our lives to this moment right now. Every time you failed, you've gotten hurt, you felt an emotion, but then you have something on your roster or your resume now to say you have an experience with that you can help somebody else. Anything that someone goes through gives them the permission, the ability, and the right to help others achieve it too.
Yeah, I think for me, the other side of that is the confrontation, because it's that stepping up, it's that part where, you say, okay, fine, I'm going to take responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But that means at some point,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to have to say to someone, if it does go wrong, that, you
Mhm.
know what, or if they disagree, it's not so much it goes wrong. It's fine if it goes wrong. I'm very happy to say, okay, sorry, I messed it up and all the rest.
Mhm.
But it's when people disagree and they say, look, the world really is flat. What are you talking about? And you kind of like trying to say, no, it's like an orange, it's round. And it's that confrontation. And you don't know. I always find just don't have the arguments. It's like the other side always has the better arguments in a sense.
True, it's about choosing your battles, but as at the same token,
Mhm.
it's kind of what Richard had mentioned in the last segment of, taking away, does it, arguments are going to happen. People are going to agree to disagree. People are going to disagree, or people are going to agree with you regardless. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's meant to. If you're lucky, that's great. If not, that's okay. The right people are going to like you. But it's a matter of, when you're coming to a situation is a clear understanding, effective communication, effective listening. If somebody says, hey, you know what, the world is flat, you're crazy for thinking it's an orange, being like, all right, well, you know what, this conversation is going to end here. It's okay.
Okay.
And I appreciate your time, and next, move on, not
Okay.
next. In my mind, next, the acronym that I say is not allowing everyone to exceed. That's kind of slang because exceed is EX towards your thoughts. Because if you're working towards appeasing people and people-pleasing manner to avoid confrontation, who's the one that's really losing?
And that
Yeah.
just doesn't work. That's an insane approach. But I know people who take it.
Right.
And
absolutely.
I am absolutely not afraid of confrontation.
You definitely appear that way.
Yeah. Whereas I'm the other side. I'm kind of like, I end up feeling, kind of bruised or something. And it's just like, wow, yes, okay, sorry, sort of thing.
No, I grew up playing ice hockey. I like confrontation. It's a great game, right?
And there you go. But, that explains it all.
Having said that, you cannot go into a battle all the time. Right. And my mom is like that, very interesting, as a sidetrack. So my mom is Swedish. Mm-hmm. My father was Italian. I am 99% super calm most of the time. And people take it to be from my mother's side, which couldn't be further from the truth. It's exactly
except on an ice hockey pitch, right?
Exactly. Then it's a red curtain that came down, and that's fine. But she is to the extreme that she just doesn't accept, being wronged in any way. And I'm like, Mom, you cannot go to war, every time, someone put a ticket on your car because you were 2 feet inside the line and they thought you were 2 feet outside or whatever. It's like, pick your battles when it actually matters, because it's emotionally draining to be on the front foot and take the fight. But it becomes an insane lifestyle to shy away from confrontation when it matters, because you just bottle it up.
Right.
And my father was like, he never took confrontation. He would always make the argument of reason at all times until it really, really mattered to him. And for me, I step in a lot earlier than that, because I don't mind the confrontation. If I think it matters, and I will take it here and now. And then I become very Scandinavian in the fact that I'm very direct. And I'm just
very direct and blunt, yes.
Yeah, it's like, it's much easier. It's like, why would I spend 5 minutes explaining what I think when I can take me 5 seconds?
Right.
Save us both time, right?
Right.
But I completely think, aligned with you, that your life becomes actually much worse because you bottle it up instead of having it out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we need to get Dr. David on the hockey rink. I think that'll just be the solution.
I'm gonna die.
I played soccer, so I can't tell you how many concussions and knee adjustments I've had. So I understand about the aggression, and it's true. It is true, because you know, I'm Colombian, Latina descent, but I was raised in an American household. I was adopted. And so I had the Irish and the Italian. And so it was to say that my passion was so much more exacerbated is an understatement, because I was just so passionate about everything, you know, in a positive way and not so positive way. And, you know, I get into conversations with someone like Richard, like, can you just get to the point? I don't need the scenic route. I just want to know, what are you asking me? To then I speak to someone like Dr. David, like, yeah, well, okay, I understand, you know, like pleasant and welcoming and nurturing. And I'm neither of those. I just get so heated when I'm passionate about something. Or, you know, one of the things, I had a conversation the other day when I was getting into a disagreement with someone, and I was getting like teary-eyed, and they're like, oh, don't be sad. I was like, you don't understand. I'm not sad. I'm emotional because I'm so heated to try to make my message clear. But it's understanding your audience, understanding the cultural aspects, the upbringing aspects, and then who that individual is as an identified own person. You know, because, you know, as we all shared of our upbringing, it's you know, I love this quote that I heard from a former affiliate who quoted it from an author. So pardon me, I don't know the exact author of it, but they said, we don't come from our parents, we grow through our parents. And I thought that was so powerful. I was like, wow, that was really, really powerful, because our parents teach us how to love, morals, ethics, moral ethics and backgrounds, or lack thereof. And so as we go through life's adversities, that's where we create our own identity. And it's amazing, as such panels that have been on, it's for you, and, you know, with rethinking choices, is really understanding, hey, you know what, we're all from different environments. But really, when it comes down to it, there's three things we want in life as the human beings: understood, respected, and unconditionally loved, you know?
Yeah. Now, having said all that, I think I've identified a major difference here, you know. I played ice hockey, you played football. There is definitely Latino element in us, right?
And I spent in the classroom doing maths.
Pass down, you know. David, he probably played cricket or something, right?
No,
he was at a calculator with the math.
Yeah,
he was doing math.
They're doing maths, you know.
Exactly.
He was problem solving, avoiding the chaos between numbers. He didn't want the friction.
Well, but exactly, there's a lot in that. I mean, honestly, there's a lot
analytical
in that, right? Yeah. It's like I don't know how to do that, but this goes to the next comment you made about communicating, you know, what we want, and I think that's something I never really quite learned in that way. I'm going to just play that clip along.
Okay. You want to join, you want to rise, you want to unite. You don't want to divide, because they're going to go after you. And then who's next in line? That person may not be able to do it either. We have to take a real sharp look, a close lens on what we want. Are we communicating what we want? Are we communicating who we're looking for? Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing, you know, because I find I'm always communicating what I think other people want.
Yes.
And so when they
go ahead, I'm sorry.
And so when I come to someone who then disagrees, I'm now completely baffled. I thought that's what they wanted. And they say they don't.
Right. But at the same regard, when you say that, then that person either didn't communicate correctly to you, or you didn't take the initiative, as Richard says, going back to the responsibility and accountability. So this is what you're saying. Do I understand that correctly? And that's reflective listening and communicating. And that's what I think we lack in this world, because, like I just gave an example, I cut you off before you were finished because I wanted to respond, because I knew where you were going as an empath, as someone, you know, in the mental health arena of social work and psychology. Because nobody in this world, and really take a few moments to absorb this, When was the last time someone had asked you, what do you want in life? What do you truly want? And has given you the ability to share and to really share what you want. We're always told what to do. We're always told who to be. Well, your parents are bankers. You should be a banker to follow that lineage. Or you have to go to school. You have to go to college. You have to have a family. You have to do this. You're constantly getting inundated with people influencing you and telling you what to do. When was the last time, or can you name one person in your heart of hearts who've asked you and effectively listened to what you want?
I know Richard's thinking there, and
Yeah.
and I have to say, I mean, you know, when you say that, right? I don't know if you saw the Netflix series Lucifer.
No,
And
I haven't.
so Lucifer, he's a very suave gentleman. He's actually from hell, but he got bored with it down there. He came back, and he got really taken up by this female detective, and he decides to help her. And he has this gift, and his gift is he asks that question: "Tell me what you truly want," and he listens to them, and then he finds out exactly what happened, and that's how he solves the cases in that way. But what you just kind of said brought out in that sense that the power of doing that. And honestly, no one's asked me that within my long time. It not in that way, and it's actually quite scary to be asked that. You kind of end up thinking, wow, how honest am I going to be?
Right. And that's what I ask. That's a part of my segment in my business. And a lot of people freeze or go into, like you said, David, go into that fear mode. Oh my gosh, no one has ever asked me that. And if they did, I gave them maybe 30%.
Yeah.
If I really cared about them, maybe 40%.
Yeah. And then have these deflection, techniques. Well, what do you want?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I don't know. What do you think I would want? Or, you would play that ping pong game.
Yes.
But to really understand and to achieve personal freedom is to really understand what is it you want. And then the next question, the follow-up question, goes to Tony Robbins' conditioning and teaching. Well, why not you?
Right. Wow. That's a big one. I'm always the guy who says, of course I'm not going to get that supermodel.
Right.
Right. And Richard is the first one to tell me, of course you're not.
Right.
Of course you're not.
Right. Of course you're not. But why not? I mean, just to kind of give a little step in is, when I began the adult journey of going into the career workforce, I kind of had an idea middle school that I wanted to be in the mental health arena because of my personal experiences of abuse and bullying. So I kind of followed suit, and I said, okay, these are the industries I have to go into and so forth. But I was always behind the scenes. You never saw my face on anything because for some reason I didn't want the credit. I didn't want to be, oh, wow, she helped this, or she, did this and so forth. I didn't really want that. So to transition now to be resilient, transparent, vulnerable, when the world changed for me, I asked myself that question. Well, what is it I really want to do? What is that? The world is my oyster, as they say. What do I do now? The world is completely, changed 360. What do I want? And then it came to me. I want to be the face of change for mental health and to enhance the quality of life for all. How do I do that? Well, that's when I enrolled in the academy with Les Brown. And then I just took it there. And now, since that change of the world for the past 3 years, I have been vocal, I have been visual, and I have been present with my face now on every continent. That's what I really wanted. But the naysayers, the non-believers, society, and, my predators and former abusers just never saw me to see that light. I had to lose everything to say, well, you can't lose anything if you have nothing. What do I want?
Yeah. There's one thing that, it's Richard and I had this cathartic experience after leaving the investment industry, because we were realizing that sustainable investing has a fundamental flaw, and it's really, really big, which is that just too much money. And it's very hard for an investment manager to say that, because it's like, how can you say that? The more money, the more we can make, and
more money, more problems.
Right. So we ended up having this cathartic year, wondering what it is. And we wrote a book called The Unsustainable Truth, which is actually, Richard could give a plug for it in another moment. But there's a section in there where we talked about reimagining the future. And we got into this thing between us of trying to say, well, what does it mean? When we interview people, we generally ask them, what do you want to be in 5 years? Because usually when we ask that question, we compartmentalize, we pretend this is what we want to do. We try to think what they do. But the honesty that you're calling for is when you say communicating what we want, it's actually an honesty. It's not the supermodel. It's something actually very personal.
Right.
And to reach into that, you kind of have to see all the things that you think you want, because people say you want.
Right.
And imagine all gone away, or in your case, actually have the experience of them going away.
Yes.
To realize what you really want.
Right. Right.
So,
it's amazing that you mentioned that about, that question. I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and the gentleman's, I can only remember his first name. He was Ed, but I'm sure he's a high influential podcaster. So pardon me if he's watching. And he said, all these businesses and all these, investors want to know what you're doing in 5 years. He's like, then you're really not living.
Yeah.
Because you're in the future. You're like, well, I did this in the past 10 years. How can I outdo that? And that is what the epiphany has had for me to press play. Now, what am I doing right now? What am I living in the moment? I'm embracing a conversation with two gentlemen who I've never met on the other side of the world. And we're having an informative, lighthearted, positive conversation. That's what I want. I'm enjoying that now in the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's why we have to kind of look and reassess when we're talking to our younger generations. What do you enjoy doing now? Embrace it. Keep doing it. What do you enjoy not doing? I talk to some children and they're like, oh, I don't understand why the way the world is today, with, their nutrition, their wellness, their sexuality, their religion, and so forth and so forth. And I said, well, what do you enjoy? Well, I don't know. Bobby likes this and Sally likes that. No. What do you want to do? What makes you happy?
Yeah.
Keep doing that,
Oh, it's very wise words, It's one of my favorite quotes, I think, is life is what's happening while you're making plans. I mean, you need to have a plan. I should not belittling that in any way, shape, or form, but not at the expense of actually missing out on what's happening.
Right.
And
what's it
what
say?
you're describing with younger
live on
generation,
hope,
I think,
or
is
whatever.
You can't live on hope, he said. You said?
Yes. What was it that you always say?
Live on faith. Have faith.
Yeah. It's I mean, obviously, young people are a different generation. I readily accept that. I have two kids in their 20s. Couldn't be more different than me. Makes you wonder at times, it's like, but
and think about 30 years before when your parents said, I
Yeah.
have two children, children that can't believe that they're me.
Exactly. And all their friends, without exception, I would say, when you ask them kind of, so, uni is over, here you're out, what is it you want to do? And then you get the usual traveling, ski instructor for a year, whatever it is. And I'm like, dude, you're 23. Do you realize that? You're going to be 25 before you start having your career. While I, on the other hand, at 16, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And 6 years later, I started. And I'm not sure which one is the healthier approach. But I am mesmerized because I don't think I'm that much of an outlier. I haven't come across a single one of all their friends who basically says, yeah, that's what I want to do. That's where I want to go. And that's what really interests me in life. It's a little bit like, yeah, I'll figure it out. And really, you're 23. Hey, come on here. You've had 23 years to figure it out. Don't you want your life to start now? Or maybe it's exactly the opposite. You don't want to start now because at that point you're set, and instead you should enjoy that moment. But I think I had, plenty of enjoyable moments nevertheless. I knew what I wanted. This is what I'm going to do.
And I'd like to, go ahead, Doctor.
No, you go ahead.
I'd like to expand upon that, Richard, because I'm smiling because it really made me think what you said, because number one, I'm a big believer that everything in this life is not cookie cutter. Like, we just have to get over that, medicine, administration, alcohol intake, food consumption, exercise. Everybody's different. But
I've tried all of them, by the way.
So you have experience, you're seasoned, so good. You're a go-to person. But in a lighter sense is, the American actor Eddie Murphy did a movie, and he said, if you think about it, look at your life. This is a little bit morbid, but I'm going to make a light shine at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. After last segment, everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so serious. Like, what happened to Dr. and Richard's segment? They're supposed to be positive. But I'm going to get in the happy part in a minute. But going back to what I said, American actor Eddie Murphy had said in one of his movies, he said, if you really look at life, we have 75 winters, 75 falls, 75 summers, 75 winters. Spring. What are the 4 seasons? Because where I am, there's only 2 now. Nowadays, there's only 2, but
Exactly. That's that's the thing that we've been saying.
Yeah. So and time, I don't know. Since 2020, 3 years is 1 year. It just seems like it went that fast. But to stay on track and focus, it's just like, I see the world as, this is my perspective and perception on life. So the first 3 years are, learning fine motor skills and, kind of understanding your body and social chemical makeup. 3 to 5, you're kind of expanding your mind as well as your, environment and nutrition and wellness and so forth. Then 5 to 8, you're kind of coming into your own personality of like who you are or whatever. And then you go 8 to 12 is, all right, well, I do like cars, or I do like dolls and so forth. And you're really kind of expanding upon your interest. And then all of a sudden, 12 to let's be honest, 16, you're going through such a hormonal or, emotional chemical balance or imbalance through your life, trying to fit in. That's all we're doing, is trying to fit in. Where's the missing piece? But the gear constantly shifts, through the stages of life. So to say in regard to what Richard said, well, by 23, you should have it all figured out. Well, if you want to go science, 23, 25 is when the brain is fully developed. But then in cultures, 23 to 25 is like 40 to 50 because, children have been working in some cultures since the age of 5. You know what I mean? And so we have to really figure out in our own sense, in our own thoughts, our own lives. Where am I at? And I always say dreams don't have deadlines. They create destinations. I had an amazing mentor that says, do it now, procrastinate later. So yes, there is planning involved to kind of expand where you're going, have a vision board, have accountability partner or coach, or kind of, like you and Richard have that, connection of challenging each other and holding each other accountable. And I'm sure there's scorecard somewhere involved in your relationship.
Oh, yes.
Could be.
But that's what you make of it. So what's happening now with the creators of technology, media, marketing, they are always instant gratification, immediate satisfaction. When in reality, if we look at the successful people based on our own personal thoughts, morals, ethics, and beliefs, it didn't happen overnight. And so we have to be patient with ourselves. That's the number one key. But have fun with it. Play with it. Really enjoy it. Hey, do I want to go skydiving tomorrow? Sure. Do I want to learn how to cook at 50? Why not? Do I want to start writing a book at 15? Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's something different for everyone. It's just a matter of being proactive as opposed to inactive.
Yeah, I like that.
Or
in the case of David, do I want to do a bit more maths revision? Go for it, son.
Yes. I'm gonna pick up my maths book here.
Always readily at hand, right? You see, priorities.
It's just sad person that I may be.
It's not sad. That's an area I need is math. Math is so scientific and just functional. I'm just, like I said, going back to joking with Richard, he's like, can you just tell me the bullet points where I'm like, hey, well, when Sally was wearing her red shirt and her, she got into can you just get to the point? Now, I don't know if it's a male female thing, because I do that with some of my connections. To some people, to others, I'm just like, no, I want to hear everything. But it's all about understanding your audience. Math to me is just foreign, but I was able to get trained and learned how to do taxes. I never, ever thought I had to do it. And I was just like, I will never, ever get this. Bless his heart, my trainer. But I was just like, what is that? What? Can we start all over again? And I now Richard was just like, it's A plus B equals C. And then I see Dr. David just like all happy singing A plus B equals C. Like he's so excited about it. So it's really understanding and filling each other's gaps. That's the part of life. We're not islands. We are, integrated individuals. And when I'm going to throw something that's going to be totally squirrel and out of the loop. But if you think of like way back when it was a barter system, how awesome would that be? Hey, you have an area of skill set. Great. I have a skill set, rather than everybody charging for things that they barely or don't even own. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I think, coming back to It's For You, the antidote to COP28 is this part where, that there's a change going on, whichever way you may find it. And I think the essence of why, people often sort of think, well, some people sort of think, what's this got to do with navigating through climate change? What's this got to do with those sort of things? But in essence, what you're saying is you can't figure out what you really want. How are you going to find your way through something like that?
Right. Well, climate change, what can you do? The actionary small steps within the confines of your own home or environment to make a difference. And we spoke about that last time. We spoke about, okay, well, maybe I can't change the whole world, climatically in a climate change, but I can start small. I can start doing it with my home. And then, like I mentioned also, you do it in your home, and then the people see the results within your home, and then they bring it to their workplace, their school, their friends, their kinship, or what have you. So there is
And
way what you
yeah,
want.
there's a bit you said before about baby steps. I'm going to play that there.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it takes baby steps. Just heightening our awareness. Having these conversations with our children, having these conversations with our schools, in our governmental environments, on these platforms. Have a discussion, because what happens with discussions is what we have here, a trinity of experiences, a trinity of, mindsets, perspectives, perceptions, and everything of this sort. So let's start talking about it. What does our world look like in the next 5 years, next 2 years, next year? Let's be honest. And what do we have? Everybody has this misconception, oh, well, it's just me. I don't really have a say. I don't really have an influence. You do. Gain back your trust, gain back your freedom, gain back your individuality. And it doesn't have to start outside in the big corporate world. It starts in the comfort of your home. Yeah, absolutely.
Very wise words from a young woman. I think that.
Thank you.
Is that a bit condescension going on there?
No, not at all. I mean, I would never
David,
have
he's
come to...
picking his battles.
Yeah, I'm going to pick my battles.
He's brave now. He's brave now.
Yeah, distance is always brave, but I'm bigger than him.
Yeah, he is.
No, but it's taken me probably into my 50s before I kind of got to that kind of insight. On one side, I've always had it in almost those who think it's a very bad trait would describe it as arrogance. But I don't really care what people think of me. I care greatly what the people I care about think of me. But I'm not going to spend my life worrying about what someone I'm meeting once at the football game think of me. It's like, this is me. You see what you get, or vice versa. And that is for me always been a great comfort, that I am what I am, so to speak. But you're describing that part when you come to realize that every little bit I actually do, every interaction I make with people matters. And that took me a long time actually to get to that point, because I just discarded it and said, yeah, that's me. And what you think it does, it's that it makes you invulnerable, because nothing will stick to you. Nothing will actually hurt you in that sense. But I think actually what I've come to realize after all these years, it's the other way around. And I was mistaken for, a good part of 50 years of my life. But I haven't fundamentally changed my viewpoint that I'm not going to change who I am. Like David made the example of the interview. What am I supposed to say in 5 years? I want your job. That's probably a standard answer. Right? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Your chair.
Your chair.
Right.
Interviewing youngsters, making them scared shit of me. David is supremely intimidating, by the way. I'm sure everyone is ever interviewed is terrified of him. But if you can,
I've got an interview story. I'm just going to throw it in there. So we were in this interview, and it was a online interview over the phone in the days before COVID. So it's kind of quite difficult. And the guy being interviewed was a U.S. Marine.
Oh wow!
And so you're thinking, really tough guy. And my friend was interviewing him, and then he then sort of came out and said, he's not answering the question. What happened? And we don't know what he did. We don't know what he asked. But the guy just gave up and left.
The interviewee?
The interviewee had just disappeared. We were thinking, what did you do?
An emotional chord was struck, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, that's something. But anyway, Richard, sorry for the interruption, but I had to get that in there.
No, you are terrifying to be interviewed by. Trust me.
That wasn't me, though.
Okay.
That was his alter ego.
Yeah, you've probably given the guy the crib sheet, This is the questions you're going to ask.
That's David Goliath.
Yeah, try to be friendly. Yeah, right. But how do you mix those two aspects, which I think now at my age I've come to understand is the combination that actually kind of works for me. I am what I am. I'm never going to alter that. I'm going to give you a direct answer to a question you ask me. I'm not going to go about in walkabout ways, because I don't have time to waste on those. Mm-hmm. And if I meet people who I'm unlikely to ever meet again, I'm not really going to lose sleep if they don't like me. But the people I care about, if they say, you know, you're an asshole, I do care about that. And I've tried to figure out what made them say that. But at the other end, going the kind of the full circle, how do you square those two? Because I've come to realize that you become less vulnerable if you accept that.
Yes. And that is where I am at the stage of my own personal life. What you see is what you get with me on camera or off camera. In my younger years, I used to be so concerned. Are they going to like me? Are they not going to like me? Am I going to fit in? Am I going to be wearing the right clothing? Am I going to be saying the right phrases and being trendy? And then when I realized, you know what? I don't have to be liked by anybody, and I don't have to care. It's not a stand of arrogance. It's about being confident with who you are and being comfortable with the uncomfortable and comfortable within your skin. However, I want to kind of do a quick exercise, because I really want to see where Richard stands in this now that he has divulged this, that, you know, he doesn't care so much if he meets a gentleman on the subway and never sees him again, but he does care about his family, because I have something to say to that. But let's first do the quick exercise. David, do we have time?
Yes.
Oh, we have all the time you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a quick, fun exercise for those of you who...
I'm fascinated to see how Richard is going to perform. So absolutely.
So if you've been following me and watched me, you know this exercise. I do it quite often. So I want you to close your eyes, and audience as well. And I'm going to give you five words, and they're going to be occupations, and I want you to think of how you feel. And audience, you can put in the comments a smiley face, an anger face, or what have you. I'll give you about a few seconds. Okay, so close your eyes. The first occupation is a lawyer.
Dull.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, type in lawyer and put the emoji on how you feel. Number 2, an acrobat.
Crazy.
Okay.
I don't know. You know, kind of exciting, adventurous.
Okay, acrobat. 3, a teacher.
Yeah.
Very respectful.
No.
Okay.
A lot of good.
4, I hope somebody's writing in the comments what these are. 4, you're going to write a garbage man or woman, garbage person.
Yeah, I can do that. I kind of, you know.
Respect.
Okay. And 5, I'm going to speak to a homeless person. So if I remember, and my memory recall is good, first was a lawyer. 2 was, guys, help me out. I think it was acrobat. 3 was
teacher.
4 was a garbage person, garbage collector, and 5 was a homeless person. Yeah. Okay, so if we type those in the comments, I'm going to go, Richard and David, I'm going to ask you for your responses. So go ahead, David, we'll start with you. Teacher. I mean, the number 1 was, see, now my recall just eliminated.
Lawyer.
Lawyer. Yes. How do you feel?
It's kind of dull. I mean, I come from a family of lawyers, so you know, my father was a lawyer, my sister's a lawyer, so it's a bit like being stuck at home. So it's kind of not really the exciting thing in that way. So,
disclaimer, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know any persons or intellectual property. I didn't know about these guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So dull, and Richard, you said dull as well, if I remember.
Yeah. Then, you know, you get other associations. Some of my best friends are lawyers, by the way.
We're just going to do that first immediate. Don't cheat, Richard.
Dull.
Okay.
Dull.
Okay. Dull. Okay. All right, and then I'll tell you mine at the end. Number 2, we talked about a lawyer. Lawyer.
Acrobat.
Acrobat. Yes.
Acrobat. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
David?
Exciting. You know, I think
Exciting.
yeah, that'll be great. You can run away from home and be an acrobat. It's good.
Okay. Richard?
Crazy people, no risk management.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Number 3, we said teacher, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah. It's fun. I love it. You know, it's very jokey, kind of good rapport with the people learning and stuff. You know, I can see myself. It's a bit like a show, doing a show.
Okay. Richard?
Just huge respect.
For teacher?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I mean, there isn't enough money in the world that would make me take charge of 6-year-olds. Okay. No.
Not even virtually?
No.
Okay. All right. 5, garbage collector. David?
Yeah, I can do that. You know, it's kind of it just feels like you get out, you're out, you're doing physical things, and you know, I actually, you know, I naturally kind of see myself sinking into that sort of situation because people don't look at you. So again, this goes down to what I said before about, you know, putting yourself, you know, what do you really want and telling people that, right? If nobody looks at you, you don't have to worry about that. And if you're a garbage collector, nobody looks at you.
Is it because you're a garbage collector or because you stink? Garbage.
I mean, there are some downsides to the job.
Right. Okay, Richard, garbage collector?
Also respect, but actually almost simultaneous, as I said, respect. The other thing that came into my mind is smart.
Okay. All
You
right.
know, you work 3 hours a day, you get paid for 8, and you work the hours that suits me just fine. I have no problem getting up in the morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, I forgot these guys were stats and facts individuals.
No, I'll tell you a story I heard once. I'm not sure if it's true. It's true. I've never verified it.
Okay.
I think they do a phenomenal job. You know, it's physically hard to lift all the stuff, and you smell, which is not pleasant, etc. But it's apparently it's pretty well paid. B, you got phenomenal pension, and C, you got terrific working hours because you can do a lot of other stuff in your life and still have an income because you're out a few hours in the morning. And apparently they put an ad in New York like 20 years ago because these jobs are never advertised. They kind of pass down because they're so sought after. And they put an ad in the paper for rubbish bin men in New York. And they had 45,000 applicants for each position.
Wow.
That's
Wow. So I won't get a chance. I'm going to have to get
So you're telling me there's not a chance?
You won't be able to do any maths revising on the job. It's hard.
Okay. And then finally, guys, homeless person.
Yeah,
David?
it's tough. It's tough. You know, I don't mind talking to them. I do that every now and then, and quite a lot. But actually being out there homeless, I think is a really tough thing. I mean, you know, garbage collection, great. The homeless part, you don't get the shower. It's
Okay. Richard?
No, it's hard. It's my first thought is sad. I think it's a modern society shouldn't allow it to happen. A modern evolved society shouldn't accept that people, when it's not their actual choice, because we do have some who do it by choice, but I think that's the vast minority of them. Everyone else does it out of various forms of hardship. And I have a good friend in Sweden who works with homeless people. And he says, you can pretty much apply this 100%. Homeless women, it's always substance abuse. Homeless men, it's always because of loss of job or loss of relationship.
Right.
Those are the two categories. He said those who fall outside that, it's very, very rare that you spot. And if those are the reasons that people actually end up on the street, I think society has the ability to deal with that and ensure that they do not.
Excellent.
Well, I think from our kind of thinking, from where Richard and I come from, is that those are the challenges that climate's going to bring to us.
Mhm.
Because the way it comes through is it increases the anxiety and the stress. Your relationships suffer, your
Right.
ability to work suffer, and the costs go up. And the next thing is, you can't make your rent.
Mhm.
Your relationship breaks down, tension rises,
Mhm.
and in that way, coming back to maybe your presence here, really, right?
Right.
I mean, that's why it's so important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the last one I forgot would be an inmate, regardless of male or female,
Ooh,
child or adult. Inmate. That was the last one.
wow,
Pardon me for missing that one.
Ooh.
wow.
Oh, 3 seconds, gentlemen.
Oh, first thing
Wow.
that came to mind.
First thing that
Vicious.
comes to your mind.
Vicious.
Pardon? Vicious?
I think
Okay.
fear.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
fear.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the recap, those 6 titles I had given was a lawyer, an acrobat, teacher, garbage collector, homeless person, and criminal. Now, the reason why I did this little exercise is because it's based on experience, it's based on media, it's based on influence. Lawyer, they said that the collective feedback was that of dull. Well, based on their upbringings, for David, a lot of lawyers were in his family. Hopefully they don't disown him after this segment.
They will now. They will now.
It will now.
and Richard said that. But think about it. Depending on which side of the coin, talking about perspective versus perception, lawyers, their intention, their attention, and their mission is to protect, and have justice served, innocent until proven guilty. However, these individuals, to my personal experience, have been estranged from their family. They work nightless hours on call. They don't rarely have a social life. They lack interpersonal skills, and they lack the ability. This, in my perspective, is money can't buy happiness. 2, acrobat. No risk management was what Richard said, and David said, "You just get up and run away from people." Well, acrobatics takes a toll on your body. It's strenuous, conditioned, drive, determination, and driven work. And they're mostly jovial people. They're mostly young at heart. But when do they really grow up? Because that profession is longevity. Then we look at teachers, highly well respected, highly paid, pardon me. But in today's world, look at today's world, teachers are being now encouraged to be armed.
Yeah.
Teachers are encouraged now to, it's not parent and teacher collaboration. It's fearful of the student. The student is calling the shot in some cultures and some areas. Teachers could also be conveyed, as I've heard, just taking the easy way out. Let me serve until my tenure and I'm done. I did my duty of service. Do they really care? And if they are in this longevity career, then have they had a mind shift? Are they keeping up with the times? Or are they grounded in their roots of traditional and conditional teaching? Garbage collector, men and women, they were talking about the smelliness. They were talking about the highly paid. But think about it. When the way society kind of molds things at a social event, even if it's not a gala or a company corporation, you're sitting at the Thanksgiving table. Hey, what does Johnny want to do? Or what does Sally want to do? Well, they want to be a garbage collector. What? You don't need a degree for that. You're going to be coming home stinky? You're only working 3 hours a day? What a waste of life. So see, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm doing here is I'm showing the different dynamics based on our perspective and perceptive. Now let's go to a homeless person. Some say this was their choice of life. Some say this was the only option in life. Some, in my perspective and perception of servicing social work and psychology for over 2 decades, society has already thrown them out. They're not helping them. They're not informing them. I mean, if you really want to go, let's go to the veterans, how they're treated.
Yeah.
Homeless person, oh, you're a waste of space. You're just, you get a job. Well, how are you going to get a job if you're not mentally and fundamentally sound? How are you going to get a job if you don't have anybody behind you, motivating you and changing and empowering you? And then we go to finally the criminal. In my last services as in the social work and psychology industries, and pardon me if I repeat myself for those of you who've watched me before, I remember connecting with an inmate. And this inmate not only was a criminal, but was a pedophile. And as well as did homicide, as well as several attempts of suicide. And I went into that room to speak with this individual. And everybody was, Andrea, you got to take their diagnosis. You got to take their rap sheet. You got to take their family history. You got to take this. I said, no, I don't. That's somebody's family member. We are going it based on their behaviors, their perspectives, and what they have done. Going back to what I said before. What do they need? What do they want? What help do they desire? Do they feel they're deserving of help? Pardon me. Mm-hmm. And when I went into that room and spoke to that individual, they listed all of the things that anybody can say about a criminal, only to realize that everything that they have done to others has been done to them, or they witnessed it at a young life. Not to be morbid, but to really go into rethinking choices and climate change. We have to be mindful of the environment and toxicity, not only in the air, in our foods, in our environment, but within our mental and physical health and medical health in its own. And the only way we could do that is to have heightened awareness and self-discovery of who we truly are. And to go back to what Richard said, he had mentioned that it really doesn't bother me, the man that I'm going to see on the subway for one stop, what he thinks, but it does matter what my family thinks. I want you to look at that question again and look at that statement again. What if your family doesn't believe in you? What if people out there's family thinks you're a joke? The reason why I say this is because I'm a living testimony of some people in my family, extended family, didn't believe in my dream. How are you going to be a global voice? How are you going to speak on every continent? Mm-hmm. You don't have the expertise. You don't have the guts. You don't have the knowledge. You don't have the wisdom. You know what? I'm going to be who I'm going to be regardless, on and off screen. Whether I'm out on the streets playing football with the guys on the field, if I'm in a dress at a, homecoming, or if I'm sitting on the couch in a hoodie with my family. What you see is what you get. We have to really assess what energy, what essence are we emulating to everyone we connect with? And take Richard's advice. Be bold enough and brave enough. I say this all the time. Ask your family. Ask your network, your inner circle. How do you see me? And then be bold enough and brave enough to crash that fear barrier, David, and say, what drew you to that conclusion? And then you can take self-inventory. How am I contributing to this world on an emotional, mental, physical, as well as contributing to Mother Earth?
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that's, what can I say? I'm going to have to think, because honestly, there's so much within what you're saying there, right? And there's this part where the one theme I think we have that has come through in the variety of conversations and presentations and discussions and comedy that we've had is that, and we've had prayers and meditations all through as one of our central points as well in there, is this aspect that the challenges are more within.
Yes.
If we are really going to be able to find that a solution there, and the challenges are more within, and when you are able to face those challenges within.
Yeah, and there's an
Then-
African proverb that does emulate that. If there's no enemy within, then the enemy outside can do us no harm.
No.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
It really resonates with me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. You know, it's been a real pleasure having you here, and we're so grateful you're able to come on live. And
Oh, no, absolutely.
and I found out a few more things about Richard, which
Yeah, there you go. No, it's
So,
been
Richard, are you going
absolutely
to? Are
fantastic
you?
having-
So, how do you feel about that? Not to put you on spot, but David told me to. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
He didn't tell me to. How do you feel about, taking inventory of being affected, of how your family and the ones that care about you feel towards you?
Yeah, hugely important, and something we debate a lot,
Right.
and something I think it's a work in progress. It's something you constantly need to do. You're not going to arrive and say this is the new me finished product. It really is a work in progress in that sense, and you need constant stock taking because everyone keeps changing and evolving. And I've always felt actually my biggest fear out of everything that can happen is being regarded as a dinosaur by the people who kind of care for it. That really
I
is
hate
my
to tell
big...
you this.
Well, the T-Rex.
I hate to tell you this.
If it's T-Rex, it's okay. Not some.
Yeah, but you have
herbivore.
little arms, so you really can't do much.
Yeah.
If you have T-Rex, you have little arms. What are you gonna do?
No, I see you as one of those
I can roar a lot.
diplodocus, the ones with the big
The
tails.
Bronchiosaurus with the
just
big head and the
lumber.
long
Yeah,
tail.
exactly.
No, but I think the biggest fear that people should not fear, or actually, let me correct that. I think the biggest fear that people should consider is, what legacy am I leaving once I leave here?
Yeah.
That should be the number one question, the number one mission, message, and intention to put attention towards. How do I want to be remembered?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Hugely important, but something I hadn't really reflected upon until I kind of not turned 50, but until my late 40s. Until then, it was like more of a nebulous concept. Yeah.
Right. Right.
But that was always your comment, right? Of starting rethinking choices was, you want to be on the right side of history.
Yeah. That's incredibly important. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Now it's very, very central in my overall thinking. Is it is important what it will say on the proverbial tombstone one day.
Right.
T-Rex with his small
the
arms.
dinosaur.
Right.
Yes,
But
thank you.
But I think it's important to really give yourself credit that you can always make a choice, make a different choice. At any stage, any age, you can make a choice. You can shift your channel, change your channel, what I say in coaching, as well as shift your stars, shift your focus. As long as you're constantly moving towards progression and not perfection, that's all that matters.
And to borrow the phrase you used, to put procrastination for later.
Yes, as the best line I've ever heard from one of my coaches. Do it now, procrastinate later.
Yes. There'll be time enough for procrastination. Just get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There is always time for that.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea.
Indeed.
Thank
really
you so much, gentlemen. I look forward. Oh, thank you. I love this mission, this cause, this message, and I look forward to future connections with everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Take care. Thank you. Be
Thank
well.
you.
Bye.
Take care.
You too.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Well, Richard,
Indeed.
So there we are.
There we are. It's just
What
you and
would
me
you-
again. We're obviously incredibly grateful to Andrea for taking the time to come on board. And
I have this light streak coming straight down my face.
okay, I'll make you smaller then. I have that power. It's I mean, she's brilliant in so many ways, and her insights are fantastic, I think. And everything she says can be applied on so many aspects of life.
Well, I think she answers a lot of the questions we were asking ourselves this morning and this afternoon. Where do we go from here? What's the step?
Yeah.
And this aspect that actually, if you keep looking forward in some sense, you kind of have to start from the right point, which is actually, where are you? How are you anchored? And it reminds me today of Cynthia when she did the meditation with her, and she talked about the 7 directions, north, east, south, west, up in the heavens and down on the ground. And the final direction is within. And that's the direction that gives the light. That's the direction of the light.
Yeah.
And that echoes very much what Andrea talks about in that way as well. So
yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, once again, I'm envious of you because you had the chance to interview her and I did not. So there we go. Unfair again. What can I say?
Yep.
Now,
shall we move on?
Now
Yep.
we're actually going to move on swiftly. We shall move on swiftly because time is ticking down. And a couple of days ago, David asked the question about, is the current investment climate tough? And a whopping 84% of you actually said it was. And I was the one who said, I think it's very tough. And David said, no, people think it's easy. So I feel vindicated in that sense. However,
once again,
you see, you're starting to detect the pattern here. I had the pleasure to interview a former colleague of us both, Erik Brudvik, former hedge fund manager and now private investor and musician and many other things. He's got many fingers in many pots and he's doing a lot of things, but he's still a very savvy investor. And particularly, he's, I think, very, very, very good at reading what other people think. And he's still very connected. So I spent about an hour talking to him, but we're going to show it in 2 segments. So we're going to start off with the first clip of what at the moment is it people find tough in the investment climate, and reverse that and say, is the climate that the factor that's making investing at the moment so hard? And this is what he had to say. This is Richard Busellato. Today, the Unsustainable Truth, I will be speaking to Erik Brudvik from Bergen in Norway. He is a former hedge fund investor. He's now a private investor, musician, and he's got involvement in so many other areas. He's a very, very smart guy, hugely creative, and he's always had a way of making me see the world that differs somewhat from the mainstream. So I'm delighted that he's agreed to come on, and I want to welcome you.
Hi, Richard. It's a pleasure to see you and to talk to you. And thanks for the introduction. I have nothing to add to that.
They feel the effect in their investments, but they don't actually fully understand that it's climate change that's driving it. Why do we have a cost of living crisis? Or people say it's the goddamn war in Ukraine, etc. Well, yes, on the margin, but the war itself is also an expression of the fact that resources are running out. And we know what Ukraine can provide to the world, and Russia is more than aware of how much of a role Ukraine played in Soviet Union welfare in terms of providing food. So underlying what's driving that, Putin can make whatever statements he wants, but I'm sure in the back of Russian strategic planners' mind is the fact that, this is food supply, and it becomes absolutely pivotal food supply in a world where temperature rises and you lose soil moisture in most areas where we grow food today. Ukraine doesn't. Ukraine stays productive with 2-3 degrees warming on the planet. The Med is gone. The US Midwest is gone. Argentina is gone. Those places will not provide you with food anymore because it gets too dry. So even there, it plays a role. But I don't think investors see it that way.
No, I don't think investors are looking at that narrative yet. I think the impact from climate change is not really there yet, because we're not yet phasing out properly the fossil fuels. I think once we really start doing that, and we potentially hit limits on power supply, etc., because the renewable stuff isn't coming online fast enough, I think that's when we'll start to worry. I think, like, for the general perception is that it's not a problem yet, and I think lots of investors are more preoccupied with near term, where's the next inflation number, and are we going to have a recession next year or not?
Yeah, I mean, you probably will for a lot of different reasons, but it's not clear to me though that you will have a recession in how we historically have chosen to define recessions, but it will feel like a recession, and I think that's what matters.
Yeah.
And when we put the poll out, is today's investment climate difficult? I thought 84% saying yes, that's a lot. I mean, it wasn't statistically super large sample, but it wasn't 10 people either, So it's telling a story, I think, that people find it difficult now, and I'm sure interest rates going up has made it difficult for people. But interest rates going up is essentially because central banks now need to clamp down on excess demand, because the planet cannot provide us with all the stuff that we did for the last 20 years without causing inflation. And that tells you you're running out of road, I think, as an investor, in how you look at your portfolio structure. How are you thinking about those things? I know you're a very smart guy, and you've been very successful as an investor, so it's great to have you on board here, obviously, on our show today. And you've always been one of the most thoughtful people I've had the pleasure of ever connecting with as an investor. So I'm gonna pass that ball over to you, really, and see how.
Thanks a lot, Richard. I think one of the really big problems that we are going to have, and which is going to spill over in lots of areas, and I think it's also going to make it harder for us to combat climate change, is this extreme increase in what do you call it, the wealth gap, basically, which has gone up tremendously because of the easing policy that central banks have had for pretty much a decade and a little bit more, right, from the financial crisis, and right up until 2022, more or less.
Yeah.
Because I think any global society or community which is able to look after itself needs to have a solid middle class, which is financially relatively secure, and which therefore has the ability to have a perspective slightly beyond their own day-to-day situation. And I think this increase in what do you call it again? Economic inequality.
I think normally we have the Gini coefficient measuring that, and it has been running away. We are more unequal than we've been for a long time in a lot of Western societies.
Yeah. And I think you're seeing this, you're seeing, what used to be liberal democracies are, leaning more towards the right. There's more, populists are getting greater traction. And I just think in an environment where people are just really struggling to get through to the next day or the next week, the erosion of the middle class, it's going to get harder to implement measures which might make things more expensive for us in the short term, but which will help us reach climate reduction targets. And it's going to be very easy for, populist politicians to lean the other way and say, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to make these sacrifices because we want to have a good
We want to be able to fly to Ibiza for 100 quid, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I totally agree. It doesn't differ at all from my own view of the fact that you see, like you said, traditional Western democracies drifting in a more totalitarian, populist, right-wing direction, but also left-wing. You know, the left wing is on the rise, which is exactly what you would expect in an economically difficult environment. People do not stay in the middle ground, and that has effects on how these democracies evolve. But you know, you've been an investor for a long time. We worked together briefly, which I tremendously enjoyed. You have got lots more investment experience than most people will ever have in their lifetime. How are you thinking about navigating a world that is basically an investment world that is completely, in my view, and David's view, and many other people's view, dictated by climate change? How do you position yourself, and what do you do to preserve your own wealth when you have inflation running 5-10% in many countries?
Well, I guess shorter term, you can be opportunistic and look for bottlenecks in the system. I find it much harder to create kind of a longer term, don't touch it kind of strategic portfolio, which I think leads back to your poll saying most people find this environment difficult. In terms of green investments, it's, you know, there's a lot of subsidies. I think there's a lot of investments being made which ultimately won't be profitable. So you have to be careful in that space. Yeah, I find it quite difficult in terms of, if you're looking at the traditional energy sector, it's hard to say what the longevity of that sector is going to be.
Stranded assets come to mind.
Stranded assets. Yeah, and I guess you also have these other things like, you know, if we have more of these kind of natural disasters, you have more, you know, floods, torrential rains, you know, what's the impact on insurance? What's the impact on banking? What's the impact on, there's a lot of sectors that are going to be influenced this in ways that we just don't know yet, I think.
Yes. I mean, it is traveling into the great unknown. I think we have a pretty reasonable opinion of what the near-term outlook would look like, that insurance is the sector that's feeling the strains first, and they will react accordingly. Premiums will go up for homeowners, premium will go up for car owners. That will not be particularly popular, but that will be okay, I think. It's the next phase that becomes politically and economically problematic when the insurance industry is stepping away and saying we are just simply not going to touch certain kind of risks, no matter what you're paying us in premium. Or effectively, they put the premium at a level that becomes so unaffordable, they price themselves out from providing a service. Because at the bottom of it all, you know, I have this, and I think most people share it, you know, in investment management space, is that if the insurance industry gets knocked out or impaired really, really badly, the capitalist system essentially ceases to function. Because if you can't have an effective risk transfer, most of the things we think about as taking for granted just doesn't operate anymore. You get a tremendous economic slowdown in a world without insurance. And that's the first step.
Yeah.
But like you're describing, we're moving on to other steps. How will it affect banks' credit portfolios? What will their lending look like? And we're actually seeing lending standards being tightened more than we would have expected just because of the rise in interest rates. So there's something else going on with the banks.
And then I feel like there's a lot of a few things, like in terms of just which technology is going to prevail and is going to be the one, you know, within any sector, which is considered the most environmentally efficient one. The answer is not yet clear. So for example, in shipping, you have a lot of ship owners or people who would normally invest in new tonnage who are holding back because actually they're not quite sure, what kind of propulsion systems is going to be the prevailing one in 5 or 10 years. Is it ammonia? Is it LNG? Is it like you don't know? You find it hard to make these decisions. But then I also think like if you could have a scenario where we actually knew, the world actually agreed, there is a climate crisis coming. We need to fight this in some way. These are the ways we're going to go about doing it. I think if that was the starting point, one could start to reason and one could maybe start to have an idea for the landscape. But then on top of that, I mean, as an example, next year, we're just, according to the polls in America, we're a couple of percentage points away from Trump winning again, and he stated that he'll immediately pull the US back out again of the Paris Agreement.
Yeah,
like there's so little visibility on what's going to happen going forward, also politically.
Yeah,
which I think makes it really hard to make a 3-year, 5-year investment decision.
Yeah, hell yeah. I think it's difficult sometimes for 5 minutes when I look at price action.
Yeah.
So, but you have many moving parts. I'm a little bit older than you, but we basically had the bulk of our investment careers in a world where the peace dividend was alive and kicking. You had a declining military spending, etc. And the world was largely, even though you obviously always have conflict somewhere, but the major players and their spending on military equipment and personnel was actually in a structural decline for almost 20 years. There was a big uptick after September 11, but then it kind of resumed again, the downtrend. And that is no longer the case. And that's a new moving part as an investor who've been around, since the late 1980s in my case, that I haven't seen. You are now in a world that's much angrier. And I think that's also a reflection of how climate change is affecting things in a much broader context than a landslide or, a storm pulling down trees and destroying infrastructure that we rebuild in 6 weeks or 6 months, whatever. There is something going on as a structural force. And I think the poll that we conducted shows that that's new. Geopolitics is getting nastier. People or the countries involved in these conflicts are actually putting more leverage into the positions that they're trying to defend. That's kind of new. You're not settling anything at the negotiating table anymore. It's really brute show of strength that gets you to where you want to be or where you hope you would want to be. And that's new. It makes the investment climate very, very difficult to navigate.
So
where do you hide?
Yeah.
And where
So we're here. And we're wondering what this is, yeah?
A little bit, I think that's a pretty dire outlook, and I'm not optimistic in that sense, because you also look at kind of valuations, and they're not cheap in a historic context at all.
No.
The only thing that actually trades somewhat, but not necessarily extremely expensive are index-linked bonds in many countries, particularly the US, even though we've had quite a bit of a rally. They are more in line with what you would expect historically. Otherwise, nominal bonds and stocks and real estate, etc. It's not cheap by any valuation metric that I know or use. If you're optimistic, you say they're fair, but even that is a bit of a stretch, I think. As we move forward, where do you think people will try to hide in this structurally changing world?
I mean, for the time being, I think there's a lot of faith in this kind of index management, just be in an index, be in the market, because you'll just miss out if you're not in.
Stay fully invested.
Which just seems to prove itself again and again and again. I'm not sure, really. I don't have a good answer.
Maybe the unsustainable truth in this case is actually that there's simply too much capital around looking for returns, and that tends to drive up prices of everything still.
Yeah. That was a point I was thinking of making.
It'll come back in a second. It always does, when you least think it will. The absolute amount of money in circulation matters, because it's more than we've ever seen. We have, as a proportion of the planet, we have more people invested in markets looking for returns than we've had historically, because you do have a growing middle class in countries which now become savers that historically weren't involved in saving and putting money to work in the investment world. So that is still increasing. But going back to, my favorite theory is the lack of respect we are showing for limits in the world, that actually there is a limit to how much the planet can provide us with without us permanently impairing it. We're still pushing against those limits everywhere, and you see it on so many measures. It's just not global warming that becomes a problem. You're depleting aquifers and you're depleting topsoil, and you have falling insect population, and we don't really want to think too much about what that means in the long term, but you are going to have crop problems if insects starts vanishing at this rate, and we can't halt it. Yeah. So that's a structurally really, really tricky world, or like I normally opt to say, it's defined by climate change and nothing else.
Because I think like the way we've rigged our world, and this is not necessarily because everyone are like cynical capitalist people. I mean, you have those elements as well, but in general, we've rigged our global society today to function only as long as there is economic growth at all times. And the easy way is to blame like the business owner, and he's rich and he's greedy. Fair enough, but look, most of us have pensions. Most of our pensions, if we took it out in cash now, would not be in the amount of money we need to survive when we get old. We're actually dependent on investing it. We are dependent on that growing, at an annual rate, which is, 5, 6, 7, 8%, which you can kind of only arrive at if you do have economic growth. So it's kind of in everyone's interest. It's in everyone's interest that we preserve the environment. But if you take slightly shorter term, or if you just think for yourself, it's in your own interest that the economy grows.
Yeah.
And like, we could. I mean, out of the 102 million barrels of oil which we consume per day on the planet, 28 million is from cars.
Yeah.
So you'll have a shift as that goes to electric vehicles, and you can talk about the value chain, might be as polluting. But simplistically, let's say we went out and say we want people to use less cars, to buy less cars, and to drive their cars less. We'll have higher fees for using roads, etc. Like take like a prime minister in Germany, where the car industry employs 1 million plus people. Like he'll never ever be able to say anything like that. It's not in his interest if he did it, or she did it, get booted out next election. It's really hard to make the tough choices that we need to make to preserve the environment. Also, in a free democracy, because people will vote you out, and I think this big increase in economic inequality makes this even harder, because most of us are in a position where it's hard for us to think about the greater good long term. We're concerned about surviving short term.
Yeah.
Because I think eventually we'll reach into a point where we need to think differently about economic growth and how that functions alongside a sustainable environmental policy. And I think it's going to be incredibly hard to make that change happen. Yeah. It will happen by necessity, but if it's by necessity, it's probably going to be when things start to spin a little bit out of control.
Don't necessarily disagree there. I think, you know, we ultimately we will be accountable for our choices, and that's how you need to look at it. It really is the compounding of, you know, 8 billion individual choices that drives the economic system we're living in, and no one will ever be able to fully escape their individual responsibility. It's very easy and nice to point a finger and saying, "Oh, the politicians are crap. They're making so many bad decisions, and that corporation is cutting the corners and polluting a river." And, you know, sure, it's not wrong, but each and every one of us own individual decision matters for how the economic system is structured and survives. And what you're describing, which is extremely close to my own view, how difficult it is with traditional political measures to change things, means that inequality is largely to blame for the near-term problems that are being created. On some measures, some of the Western democratic, evolved countries, liberal even, we might want to call them, are as unequal as we were in the run-up to the French Revolution. And that is really food for thought. Because when you get to that level of inequality, good things tend not to happen to society.
Yeah, exactly.
And that really is something that keeps me up at night. And then you have the other aspect, which is pensions is largely the bulk of our savings. It's the biggest pool of capital that sits and invests in market. And that is going to keep on growing as population ages and more middle class people in historically non-saving countries gets on board. So it's not going to come down. And then you have to ask the question, which is perhaps more philosophical than economical. Roughly speaking, you know, we spend a third of our lives working, saving, to be able to spend a third of our lives putting our feet up and living off those savings. I cannot really think of another single animal or plant that takes out of the system resources for its own good to be able to have that kind of life cycle. It just doesn't exist. Sure, the camel can store water to make the journey through desert, and bears go into hibernation and they fatten up, but then they come out and they contribute. It's really only mankind that think it's okay to spend a third of your life not contributing to society. And I'm being a bit harsh here, but in strict economic terms, I need to make so much money that I don't have to worry about the last third of my life. It's very how should we call it, an abnormal way of thinking about the whole economic system, I think. And it puzzles me. And when you raise these questions with smart people like you, everyone kind of agrees, you know.
Yeah.
But how do you get around that unsustainable truth that we cannot accommodate, you know, 4 or 5 billion people saving for the retirement, because then the planet will collapse in no time. It's already kind of fraying at the edges, or maybe more than the edges. And we only have 600 million people today that are saving in the traditional investment way of thinking about it. What happens when we get past 1 billion, 1.5 billion? Because we're going there very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, financially, what might happen is you just have the same money chasing the same assets. So this thing kind of lasts for a while and extends, and we struggle to make sense of it. But that's the way it is. But yeah, I just feel, you know, when there's this, what do you call it? This requirement for consistent economic growth mismatch versus, you know, the need to protect our environment.
Yeah. You're going to
at some
kill the
point,
golden goose,
something
right?
will break. Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually when things break, it comes a bit suddenly, and the impact is quite dramatic. So.
Yeah, all those nice events that take place historically that you don't really prepare for, and you know, I think we think quite alike there.
And I guess of course, back to the investment perspective, like I remember I was very young at the time, but like early 2000s, and China was emerging, and was it Jim Rogers who had his book Commodities or something? Like everyone read it, and it was so easy to paint this 20-year kind of horizon of everything just growing, China growing, commodity demand growing, and there was ample of, you know, resources to exploit and to find. Inflation being kept low because China would take over a lot of the production of goods that we consume in the West. Like you had this, at that time, what felt like quite a long runway for things to actually be really, really good, which made it easier to make investments. Right now, I just don't feel you have that. Like you don't have clarity on what's going to happen politically or geopolitically. You don't have clarity on what's going to happen in terms of the shift, the green shift, and which kind of environmental standards or which technologies will prevail. You have the income inequality thing, and democracy is feeling a bit. It's not easy.
The poll is telling us it's tough, and you're definitely agreeing with it.
So yeah, and I think that's why a lot of, you know, investment professionals do find it quite hard, and have found it quite hard for some time.
Yeah, I can only concur. Well, there you are. The first clip of that interview. It was quite sobering, and it was a much more low-key discussion than I had anticipated. He's a very thoughtful guy, and he hadn't prepared any answers. I hadn't given him any questions. He wasn't actually aware that we were going to talk about investments to start off. But I think what he's saying resonates with our poll results, that people do find it tough because there are so many moving parts.
So I did this thing, right? While I was listening to all that, and I was looking at our energy. And basically, our energy at the moment looks like I'm not going to show. Oh, I'm not. No, can I show the chart?
Yeah. Go for it.
Where's it gone? There you go. So that's our total primary energy over time, 1965 on to 2022. This is renewables, basically.
Yeah.
And it's at 190 exajoules at the moment. The total is 2487. So the difference is essentially oil and gas and coal, you know, to within that sort of thing. And we say we triple this by 2030, which is the pledge. So that takes to 570. Now, I also had a little look at the GDP of economies. You know, Russia has grown like 5% over the past year in the middle of the war. Okay. Brazil is like 3, India is like 5, China's dropped to 5, US is kind of like 3. And so we basically expect, 3% growth or whatever it is.
Yeah, a bit less, but not much. Yeah.
And that's going to match the amount of energy we need. So that I did a simple thing to estimate what that is. That takes that energy basically from 24887 to about 2900, 3000. Exajoules is what we need there. something like 3,000 exajoules. When I work out what that means after taking away the growth in the renewables, it means that we still need oil, gas, and coal to grow by like 4% over the next year.
Yeah.
Over the next 6 years until 2030. Now, that's kind of the energy picture in a way, right?
And that's the picture EIA painting, etc., right?
And this is an extremely positive picture that we actually can do this, because if you look at what's happening at the moment, Quantum, the Canadian copper miner, is having significant problem in Panama because of the contract that they had to extract has just been rescinded by their high court, and it looks like they're going to go bankrupt. And that's about 1.5% of global copper production. And we need the coppers to make the wind turbines. We need the coppers to actually transmit the energy from the solar panels, and we need all those things.
Yeah.
And for all the talk about how we get these amazing technology advances, they take time.
Yeah.
So each year counts. So if you skip a year, you got a little bit more problem. Plus, we are kind of into that 20-year cycle when we first put these up. Now, there weren't that many put up, but they were still put up. And we're into that kind of end of life cycle where we have to deal with those things.
Yeah, it's going to be a significant.
And increasingly, our renewable energy that we're bringing on is being used to extract oil and gas and coal. So it's not really displacing anything. It's not the tripling of renewable energy that displaces that curve in any way. So the perspective from that is what we're going to get is, in all likelihood, unless the growth picture, which you and Eric is talking about, fails, we are going to get a continual increase in oil and gas and coal, at least until 2030, which basically means all the attempts and all the comments about how we're going to close the gap and stuff is going to go out the window.
Yeah.
We will be by 1.5 degrees over. We will have the climate devastations as an everyday affair. You saw the news about all the other things that are going on in the climate, and kind of Munich airport being shut, Cumbria dropping to minus 12 degrees, all sorts of little things. And of course, these causes disruptions, which hits your insurance industry, the comments that you guys made about it. And of course, our pensions aren't going to be doing well.
No.
So those challenges become really important. And that leads back a little bit to what Andrea Mason was talking about, which is really, how are we going to face those things? How are we going to ask ourselves, what do we really want?
What matters?
What do we really want? It's a bit of sobering kind of thought. Sometimes the numbers give you some sobering kind of effects, because people talk about tripling the renewable energy. They don't work out how much our energy demand is likely just to increase.
Energy has grown year on year. It's not enough. Energy demand has grown year on year for like 60 years, barring 2 years when we had full-blown utter recessions. And that's not debating. That's your blue line, right? It's like,
let me go back to that.
A 3-year-old child with a reasonably straight ruler would figure out where that one is heading.
Right, that's this line here, right? I mean, it's just going up in a reasonably straight line, as you say. It's not giving up on that thing. We're not turning over, but this has been exponentially increasing in that way, and it's still keeping that there. So, if
that uptick had come 25 years ago, you would feel a lot better.
Yeah, well, 25 years ago was when we were supposed to have been replacing it, but we forgot to do that.
Yeah,
and it goes to this question we put out today. I don't know how that poll is going, actually. What would you want to do? Should you cut it? We say for every gigawatt hour of renewable energy that you get, right? What would you? What do you think we should do? Should we displace a complete, kind of block of it? Or what's the question that we did? Do you remember?
Yeah, for
how we
every
expressed it.
gigawatt hour of renewable energy we take on board or take online, what should we do with the equivalent amount of energy produced by oil, gas, and coal? Cut it in full, use half of it to cut it, don't cut at all, or keep increasing it?
Yeah, I'm afraid we haven't had much responses to that poll. So
Well, it's early
not,
days yet.
it's not very helpful.
Early days.
But
No.
not
But by
having much
tomorrow we will
responses.
have some good.
Maybe,
No,
but
tomorrow
I
we
think
will.
not having responses is really also indicative that people don't really think of that as an issue. It's
That's
not a
entirely
question
possible.
they really
And
want to
should
be
not
answering.
obviously be regarded as the. Oh, that could also be the case. Either they just don't know really, because they haven't
No,
been
because
asked similar things
in the
before. Don't
question
know
we
how to.
asked, in the question we asked about the investment and environment, there were lots of responses very rapidly. To this poll,
Yeah.
there aren't, and I think that's very, very informative in some ways, because in many regards, I think people don't think this is something that we should be dealing with, but it should be something that governments should be dealing with.
Yeah.
There have been several hundred impressions, which means that people have looked at it, but not many people have voted because they just don't think it's relevant.
Or they're terrified because they actually understand the question better than we think.
Well, then that's also an extremely bad indication, right?
Yeah. Sometimes be careful what you wish for or ask for in this case, I guess.
So the real hope is that your perspective, the comment you made about Ukraine and how it's an area which retains soil moisture, and therefore out of the areas of kind of massive food production, it comes one that's okay. I think the hope is you're wrong.
Yeah.
That climate damages really are not as disruptive to our economy. I mean, job openings were low back to the 2021 low today, right? U.S. job openings.
Yeah. It's the first real on a chart. It's the first sign that the labor market in the U.S. is actually cooling that we've had, and that's after 2 years of Fed tightening.
Yes. And you have this new initiative out of COP to what they call cooling climates, right? To try and work on the air conditioning and those sort of pledges in that way. But of course, in a world of increasing summer temperatures, air conditioning sales is just going to keep up the ground. No government is going to ban them.
No.
Can you imagine banning air conditioners?
Do you want to stay in power? That's the internal question, right?
Right.
You're not.
Well, people would die. I mean, they at 40 degrees heat, 70% humidity, you're dead, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have serious health issues, the first thing that's going to happen is that labor productivity will collapse.
Yes,
and that will have quite significant economic consequences. But it's a very broad area to debate. It's so many moving parts to the whole discussion at the moment.
So that economic side and that sort of developed world economy side and that sort of growth side has the element where it feels like we're entering into this runaway cycle, which looks extremely well in terms of investment, because there's going to be huge amounts of activities to try and catch up with the consequence of all of this. The damages from the roads and the sort of the ways we need to protect ourselves with air conditioning, and in the winter the sudden sharp heat. I've got 2 jumpers on.
Yeah,
and
I have one. Yeah,
but when my wife comes back, the heating goes up by a large amount in that way, right?
Yeah.
And in many households, there are no choices. You just have to do that because the houses you can't change very easily in that way. And so where you end up being is that you are in this part of a cycle where you're being overwhelmed in some way, but it looks good because the GDP looks good. And
And if you then go and say, well, we should go to Bhutan and switch this happiness index and look at that, well, that may actually make things worse, because you can have the happiness index look really good and still create huge amounts of activities.
Of course.
But you're now no longer looking at the activities at all.
No. And we're a lot happier when a house is warm, right? So
yeah. So what you end up doing is you end up accelerating this kind of, it comes like a catalytic cycle, right? You end up accelerating the devastations, the hollowing out of our economy, the inability for it to support itself, but it looks like you're doing the opposite.
Yeah, that's proper food for thought.
Being drunk at a party.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
when you cross over that point, when you think you're kind of live and so at the party and everyone's talking to you, but really everyone's staring and thinking what's going on. But
yeah, I'm always in that zone.
But now it's everybody like that, right?
Yeah, that's sobering enough, actually. Well, we're going to ponder a little bit more, but first we're going to show the second half of the interview, where we extend some of these arguments and start poking at them a bit more intensely. Second part of the interview coming up. Through these mega cycles, as have you, despite being a bit younger, but you know, we had the peace revolution, you had China come on board. Yeah. And one of the constant features you saw there happening was actually that trade barriers were being torn down all over the world. Global trade was increasing, global tariffs were diminishing. So you were driving the world towards some kind of more optimum point for production, where it was most economically efficient to locate yourself. And China was, and actually not only China, a large part of the rest of Asia, to a lesser extent North Africa and maybe even South America, became recipients of these investments because they were driving down the marginal cost of labor quite dramatically, which resulted in deflation, and central banks with very, very blunt, strict numerical inflation target thought it was a good idea to target 2% nominal inflation, when maybe the actual economic equilibrium should have been 2% deflation, because that was the environment you were operating in. And I think central banks will not come out of this looking too clever or even in any way or shape or form like the adults in the room. They're going to carry a lot of blame for all the mishaps that are happening today, that I have no doubt about. You know, when grandchildren, and in your case, younger children, are going to university reading about this stuff, I think the history will be pretty harsh on the people who conducted monetary policy for those 20 years. That I have no doubt about. So, gloomy as we are, we also need to be optimistic. You live in Norway. It's a country on the forefront of, you know, a lot of conversion to more sustainable practices. You're world leaders in renewable energy. The people have very high expected life expectancy is very high.
Well, it's easy to achieve all these things when you're also the fifth largest fossil fuel exporter in the world, right?
It has helped, no doubt. I think we can safely say that, you know, Norway, despite all its green credentials, still have this dark chapter, because, you know, you export a lot of oil and gas, for sure. How would you describe the current debate in Norway about what we've been discussing today, the conversion to more sustainable practices? Is the truth in sort of, maybe in Norway's case, is the unsustainable truth the fact that Norway cannot come off fossil fuels because it still provides the country with so much economic benefit near term that Norway would never consider closing down its oil production?
I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, we have a government now who you know, they kind of exhibit a good set of values, at least to me, in a lot of ways, but they're also very clear. Like, for example, they do not want to plan for a phase out of Norwegian oil and gas production, for example. There's been calls for them to commit to that because, I guess, similar to what you and David are saying, as soon as you have, you know, there's a finiteness to how long we're going to extract these resources and use them. Once you have like a deadline for that, it's going to facilitate a lot of the other investments that we need. Norway is not willing to commit to that. And again, I think it's the politician's problem, right? Like you can't stand there as a politician and say you want to get rid of, you know, the biggest industry in Norway, which employs a lot of people, and which is the source for a lot of our wealth. The way they try to get around it is to like, you know, talk very nicely about things. Like, there's a lot of talk about how Norway is going to meet our own emission reduction targets effectively by I think it's so silly, but I think it shows how people try to get around this without actually addressing the problem. They want to significantly reduce the carbon footprint of Norway by electrifying all the operations offshore, which is related to the extraction of oil and gas. So effectively, it means building an underwater electrical cable from the mainland of Norway and out to the platforms in the North Sea. And then you can say, well, because on the mainland of Norway, lots of the electricity generation is from hydropower, etc. So it's 100% clean energy. So if we do that, we'll reduce our carbon footprint along with the targets. But of course, our grid is also connected to the European grid, where the marginal producer is coal, right?
Yeah.
So if we send some of our hydropower to the North Sea to make our numbers look better, you know, you're just going to ramp up a couple of more coal plants in Germany to supply electricity for Europe. So it's kind of a zero-sum game, and it doesn't make sense. And we're going to use billions of taxpayers' money just to make this, to me, like cosmetic improvement in our own emission numbers to comply with CO2 emission targets. It's stupid.
It's absolutely crazy. I mean, my views, as you are well aware of, is that it's almost the definition of insanity in this case, because ultimately it kind of matters what your neighbor does when you breathe the same air on the planet. And forcing Germany and Poland to start burning more lignite is probably not a good idea if we have any form of environmental targets. So it doesn't make any sense in my world. But perhaps, you know, people don't think enough about the extension of that argument you presented, that what your neighbor does matters hugely to each and every one of us. And then we actually need to facilitate their ability to not having to use the worst of fuels.
Yeah.
And electrifying oil production is just, I mean, it basically is insanity from where I'm sitting. You know, I don't see anything that will come as a benefit from doing that other than grandstanding and patting yourself on the back and say, oh, we've reduced our own use of fossil fuels even further. But everyone else's has increased. So, you know, zero-sum game. It actually might even be a negative sum game because you do lose some of the electricity as you transfer it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you spend a lot of money doing it, which probably could be spent in much better ways.
Returning to shipping. We have seen some prototypes actually of cargo ships now in the tentative phase, starting to make use of wind through various sail-like contraptions.
Yeah.
As old Vikings, we kind of we think that's a good idea, or at least it's a very, very interesting idea. Do you see that as a potential source of investment? Do we need to start thinking more like that in other areas? For shipping, it's very obvious. If you can use part of your energy through something that is truly renewable, without losing too much speed, etc., and in some instances actually improve the safety of the ship as well. Is that something you think will catch on, or does it remain a utopian dream of people that we will start sailing with these huge container ships again?
So I'm not that into the kind of engineering science behind it. If it works, I think it sounds like a great solution. When it comes to wind power in general, the problem is that they take up a lot of acreage.
Yeah.
Offshore wind to me seems okay, but it's more expensive.
Yeah.
Onshore wind, I just have a feeling like if you go 100 years forward in time, and the whole coastline of, say, Norway, for example, is populated by these hundreds or thousands of kind of half rusty windmills barely turning around, I'm quite sure we'll look back and say, what the hell were we thinking here? Like it doesn't. I can see why, like, one windmill at a time. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes electricity and it's from the wind. It's great, but it just seems like on a larger scale, there must be a better solution. To me, I think going back and looking at nuclear plants, can we build them? Can we build them safely? Can we build smaller ones? There's a lot more energy concentrated in a small area.
Yeah.
We seem to have been able to handle this pretty well for the last 60 years, if you stay out of earthquake zones.
But you have very long lead times. When you start building nuclear, it's not putting a shovel in the ground. You don't have a really functioning nuke for a decade. So the lead time is very long.
Right. What exactly is it that drives the lead time there? Do you know?
I assume it's all the safety procedures you need to follow once you start building, plus you need all the approvals for where you're going to build it. Because if you think that putting a sort of wind tower in the neighborhood is not particularly popular, putting a nuclear power plant in your backyard is even more unpopular. So getting through the whole approval procedure, but also the building, the structure of it takes a lot longer because you have so many dimensions, including the cooling and the safety. You always have to have access of the ability to cool the reactors, etc. So it's a long process, but with hindsight, which we love to have at times, it certainly doesn't seem like the smartest decision ever was to phase out German nuclear power before its time and start burning lignite instead, which is effectively what Germany does because of that decision. And even the Japanese are on the same route. They closed down basically their nukes after Fukushima, and instead they're burning a lot of coal to provide the country with electricity. But you touched on something really, really interesting there, which I happen to be a huge fan of. I think it would be by necessity something we will see tomorrow, and that is much more localized grids, a much localized source of energy for smaller areas rather than connecting huge, vast areas to a centralized grid, and with all the risks that entails. So localized grids is something I definitely see happening. Would that be an area you think where it makes sense to invest? Is that something you're looking at as a smart, forward-looking investor? I'm sure you are, because I think a lot of people are sort of at various stages of evaluating how we can build a safer grid, but also something that de-risks the fact that if you have massive grid failures, what does that mean for the countries and even areas at large compared to if you have a small grid failure?
Yeah. I think it's a theme. I wouldn't know exactly how to access it. You know, which companies would you invest in, or would you then be in like smaller scale utilities, which are non-listed? I'm not sure how you'd access these opportunities, or if any of the bigger utility companies, for example, in Europe, have this as a policy.
I think what I see at the moment is mostly unlisted projects where people are trying to raise money for various parts of putting it all together. And maybe it's just one of those parts that end up making the money. That's entirely possible. I don't know. I do think it's an interesting area. I'm a huge believer actually that it's the only viable path forward in many ways. Let me rewind. Why I think it's the viable path forward is that all solutions from here on will have to involve us using less energy. That's almost like step one. You need to curtail the planet's use of energy or this will not end well. Bang. That's for me is an absolutely 100% truth. Our current use of energy in the way we do it is completely, utterly, and totally unsustainable. Going from there and how you can provide the amount of energy that each and every one of us needs to basically have a base living must surely be safer and more efficient through a localized grid. Maybe each community should have one wind power plant, you know, that gives you 30% of what you need so that your fridge works, your freezer works, stove works, and you have some basic ability to keep your electronic equipment running. Because if the central grid fails, you can always fall back on that. You don't have a disaster. It might be, you know, putting on an extra layer at home, but you are not going to have, you're not going to freeze to death in your home, and you can cook food and you can preserve your food, etc. And for me, that's basically de-risking the system. So I like it very much. And it also gives a decentralized democratic choice for each community to say, how are we going to distribute this energy that we have, that we don't get from, you know, a miraculous cable coming from somewhere, whether it's been by burning coal or turning on a reactor. It's actually ours because we have the source of energy. Yeah. And how are we going to distribute that? Is it per capita? Is it by the size you live in? Is it by the amount of taxes you pay? We can have a discussion about that. But localized production of energy, for me, is a no-brainer. Because then all of a sudden becomes much more tangible as well in the part of how much energy we actually use. So that's something I'm looking at, because people don't like to say it, but I'm not afraid of repeating it. Our future will by necessity have to involve us using less energy, not more. For me,
there's one renewable source we haven't talked about yet, which is solar.
Yeah.
So I live in Bergen, and there's more than 200 days of rain every year, so it's not that relevant for us. But you know, there are certainly other parts in the world where it's a lot more relevant. It's my impression that actually that's part of the renewables build out which is still functioning. But it's not an industry I know that much about, actually.
I'm certainly not an expert. I think you have a couple of issues with it. What's definitely the case is that the marginal cost has come down a lot.
Yeah.
And solar now is a viable alternative without the need for subsidies in many places, because it can actually provide you with energy on a competitive level. And that's another thing that I'm an absolutely firm believer of, is that you cannot actually change things sustainably and durably if you're relying on subsidies. It needs to be on solid economic foundation for people to switch. And then we can debate how you achieve that with regard to the fossil fuels. But solars have, however, a couple of issues. First, you have the decommissioning of them. These are highly toxic materials that, once they're used, cannot really be described as sustainable in what we're doing with them. I think at the moment we're just burying them in a desert somewhere once they've run out their shelf life. From a practical use point of view, you have two issues that comes to mind immediately, and I'm sure there are others, but this is a layman speaking. I'm not a scientist. What we do know is that they start losing efficiency quite quickly if it gets too hot. Over 55 degrees, you have a problem, because actually then you start transmitting less energy and less power. And in many places now, which would, unlike Bergen, with its 200 days of rain, be perfectly suited for solar, it's simply too hot. Because in the sun, in a lot of places now, you are way above 55 degrees. So that presents an issue. The other issue, which I can see physically with my own eyes, because my neighbor has installed a battery of solar panels on his garage roof, is that the efficiency drops fairly quickly once they get dirty. Once you have enough particle cover of them, you actually need to clean them. And that involves him stepping up on a ladder with a towel, cleaning them. And he does that a couple of times a year. But it's not, he's probably my age.
Utility scale solar parks is the solution then?
Well, you need to come up with a system for how you're going to maintain efficiency, because it's pretty clear that you have a lot of particles in the air that will get attached to them, let alone when you have more natural kickers like, big rains that provide splattering unless they're high up enough, and you will have storms bringing crap basically attaching themselves. So if you want to keep the efficiency at the levels that we would like, and what obviously calculus are based on, because funnily enough, in this world, everyone seems to base their calculus on best possible outcome, not worst possible outcome. You need to figure out how to address those two issues. And the first one is simply physical. If it gets too hot, it's more difficult to transmit energy. The second one will have to come in some practical form, how you keep up the efficiency by ensuring that you don't have these particles getting stuck.
Yeah.
But solar clearly is one path forward we've seen in many places. So, and it's clearly very specific to the places where you can install them. Geography matters hugely here. You need sun hours. End of story. We haven't touched on a few other unsustainable truths today because, time is running out, and it's always great to speak to you. I always learn a lot every time we talk, and I enjoy speaking to people who are smarter than me.
Maybe, we can wrap this up, but one thing we haven't mentioned, which is also important, is how the change in interest rate regime, or the fact that we have now significantly higher rates than we had a few years ago, has really pushed up the cost of capital.
Yes.
And for a lot of these green investments, if you think about windmill parks, solar parks, essentially it's a huge upfront investment, driven by the cost of component, the cost of engineering services, the cost of land or licenses. So you need to finance that huge cost at day one from the cash flow that you're getting from the electricity that you will then be selling. But clearly, if interest rates move up as much as they have, then clearly the break even for that installation changes quite materially. So we suddenly need a much higher electricity price than we would have needed a few years ago for these investments to be viable, purely from the move in interest rates.
Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that the way you want it to happen, so that we start using less?
Well, we either start using less, or I think the problem is because a lot of the fossil stuff, a lot of the costs have already been sunk in. So we're just milking the profits.
Yeah.
That sector is making more money, so they can afford to spend a bit more on investments as well. Whereas if you're looking to build out renewable, then your break-evens are just higher.
Yeah.
Which could slow the build out, but I mean, it depends. If the electricity price goes up to match it, then it's fine.
Yeah, I have a respect for a lot of people's opinion on this, and I'm trying to absorb their smartest arguments for all aspects of how it will pan out, how we hopefully can actually cut production of fossil fuels pretty soon. I can't really see how you're going to do it without some form of price increases, so that people shave away the most frivolous of use of energy, that the unnecessary part. And I do think people are rational. So if price go up, you tend to consume less. I know that doesn't apply to luxury goods, but I don't think energy will be qualified as a luxury good. But it's a really tricky discussion. It's something David and I enjoy tremendously talking to people about, and organizations and businesses about, and how you forge that path forward in terms of tomorrow. Because I think tomorrow will be tougher than yesterday, but most investment opportunities I see presented to myself today and the people pitching them, they always assume tomorrow is going to be like yesterday, or even better. That's kind of the base case assumption for everyone. It's like, tomorrow is going to look like yesterday. That's the base case. It's like every chart I've ever seen drawn in front of me is always an extrapolation, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I don't think tomorrow's world is an extrapolation of what we're seeing today. And for me, that is the unsustainable truth, that tomorrow will look very, very different than yesterday. And how do you prepare yourself? How do you prepare your business? How do you ensure that you become more robust and resilient in the face of a much more hostile planet? That's going to be huge challenges for business owners. It's going to be huge challenges for investors all over the world. Yeah. How you can kind of protect your portfolio and the people who rely on them for their survival. I think that's a really, really tough outlook for me. And I don't really subscribe to any of the rosy scenarios going forward. I really, really don't. I hope I'm proven wrong in some ways, but I kind of made my bed and I've taken those decisions, and I'm looking at my portfolio and I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? It has done really, really well the last 3 years. I don't see that changing. But maybe, it's all a false dawn, and we go back to tomorrow being even better than yesterday. Who knows?
But I agree with you that I feel like the prevailing scenario, which is being pitched, which kind of emanates from kind of big asset managers and BlackRock, etc., is that this green transition is an enormous opportunity to create jobs, to replace polluting sources of energy with renewable sources of energy. It's just this fantastic transition which can happen in parallel with an economic growth scenario. I just think, like, that we also need to address that at some point we can't keep growing the way we have been. I don't think it's a case of simply taking the energy usage we have today, use the traditional plus 2% per year forever, but we'll just replace the generation with something renewable. I think part of the discussion has also to be, how can we actually limit our energy usage, stop it from growing, and maybe see it start to decline? And you rarely hear about that.
because it's not a growth story.
It's uncomfortable, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's an uncomfortable. I think it's definitely is the unsustainable truth in this sense that if our energy use keeps increasing like many forecasts show, it will not be a happy end. It's firmly my belief. So
yeah.
Let's round off there. You know,
all right.
With me in the studio today, I've had Erik Brudvik from Bergen, Oslo, former hedge fund manager, now a private investor, one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with. He's a very, very thoughtful person. He's got fingers in many pies, and it's always a huge pleasure talking to him because I learn something every time. Thank you, Erik.
Thank you. All right.
Lived through the.
I mean, interesting, but I have to say one thing. And by the way, I did a mistake in the calculation before. It's still 4% growth, just got the base numbers wrong. Anyway,
Okay, there we are.
So coal still has to go, oil, gas, and coal still keeps increasing by like 4.5%, even if you triple your energy, your renewables. But this thing about nuclear, I mean, I read a recent article. It's a very interesting article. It basically said, look, do you honestly think the West is going to allow some state in Africa to go and have nuclear weapons?
No.
Because allowing them to have nuclear reactors is what you're allowing that to happen.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
And those are the places where energy demand is going to rise. And is it easier for them just to go along and burn a lump of coal, or to go along and actually have the nuclear program? They would love to have the nuclear program, but what are you going to do when they carry the nuclear dirty bomb in their suitcase over into John F. Kennedy Airport?
Yeah. No, it's not going to happen. I think very, very few new nations will have the ability to develop nukes, not because they cannot, because I'm sure they have the technological know-how to do it. It's simply that those who have access to uranium will not allow it to go to others. So they cannot really source the fuel for the reactors.
Then the problem you have is the areas in the world which are driving the demand for energy to increase, which are not.
No,
that's not Europe, and that's not America, and that's not those places. And so in many sense, the conversations are completely misguided in thinking that it's actually driven by the places with the money, because the energy demand is driven by the places without.
Where you have the most population growth and most catch up in economic growth terms, yes.
And in all those places, the opportunities of nuclear is not one that they can go down, or that one that they will be allowed to go down.
It's a combination of both, but it doesn't really matter because they won't have them.
Or you do that, and those tend to be regions which have a high degree of conflict, and so you essentially open up the possibility that you're going to have a lot more proliferation of small-scale nuclear weapons floating around, because that's what small-scale nuclear reactors give you.
Yeah. Cheery note, but definitely the unsustainable truth in that sense, I think. I don't.
So I think the comment on nuclear power is largely moot.
Yes.
If you do not allow the whole world, 7/8 of the world's population, to have access to nuclear fissile material.
No, but in the countries which have access, you will probably build out more. I can see China and India build out more nukes. I can see actually Europe making a massive U-turn and going back to nuclear technology.
It's interesting. Before we go, then let me just share this again. And this is not that one, this one. Yeah. Is this right? Yeah, this is China. And this line here is nuclear. This is the energy provided, and it's basically turned over.
Yeah.
And this is China. They've got no fear of nuclear as such.
No.
But the aspect of this is the growth was tied up to a nuclear weapons program. Once that drive of a nuclear weapons program went away, the actual incentive stopped because the use of the nuclear materials became too limited.
Yeah, there you have it.
And the cost of the security associated with this, because they don't want their own people walking around with dirty bombs.
For sure. Who wants it? Yeah.
So that became a huge cost.
Yeah, I think we will reassess, but the lead times make it not a quick fix in any way, even if you decide on doing so. And there will have to be other sources of energy if we're going to replace fossil fuels.
Well, as closing mark, I think what Eric mentions is absolutely right. We just don't spend enough effort on how much energy we use that's unnecessary.
Yeah.
When Ian won his, got his points for not using those electrons for showing up for the comedy. There's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah, it's an
so maybe we should end on that.
Worth pondering.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
It's been really enjoyable, as always. Thank you to Andrea Mason for taking her time to be here. Really appreciate what she says, and it does come back down in terms of the choices we make to being able to answer what do we really actually want. What do you really?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Thank you
very
all.
much. We're back tomorrow, 7 o'clock in Tokyo, 7 o'clock in Karachi, and 7 o'clock in London time. Until then, thank you.
Thank you.